Just make your speeches.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started.
Thank you so much. I want to welcome everybody to the NAB meeting tonight on June 20th. And we've already at past mid-June already. This year it's flying by as usual. So Dylan, if you could follow the roll, that would be good.
Chair Fuji Strickler,
Here.
Stephen Forzer. Absent this time, Fisher,
Here.
Hinman,
Here.
Keats,
Yeah.
Langdon. He is here in the Zoom. I'm going to promote him to a panelist right now. But for the meantime, we will mark him as being here. Okay, Shin,
Here.
Taylor,
Here.
Councilmember Naomi Dewar.
Here.
Perfect. And I'm your staff liaison, Tyler Shaw. Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you so much. It's nice to see everybody here this evening. And with that, I'd like to go on item number 18.
Yes, we do have one person registered for public comment in person. I'm going to call Pablo Nava Duran. Pablo, please come to the front. You'll have 3 minutes.
That's fine.
Or yeah,
Here we go. So hello guys, my name is Paul Naduan. I'm currently living in Ward 3. I might move out of Ward 3 because of rededicating, because I'm a little concerned because I'm one of those neighborhoods. I live in near one neighborhood, and one of those neighborhoods I could be moved out of Ward 3 due to having 6 wards together. So I went to Ward 3 2 weeks ago with Miguel Martinez. He is my council members. And you talk about like how a ward sec can affect my neighborhood, could move out to Ward 2 or maybe Ward 6 or Ward 1. That depends on it. And I went to all the council meetings except Ward 4 because I cannot step back to Ward 4 on Thursday because I had to go to Gavin Reed's fundraiser events. Talk about we did street and I know Miguel Martinez lived in Bar Spring area. And Ward 1, Jenny Burkett, doesn't matter because you got the term now after point for election season, you're gonna be out, have a new council member. So, and Ward 5 is Kathy Taylor, but could be Ward 6 or Ward 5 with Down Reeds, that depend on Down Reeds, or maybe Ward 1 with Down Reeds here because down we live in on Somerset and Kathy Taylor live in downtown Reno. And then Ward 4, I did miss out on Ward 4 because I know Megan Ubers live in North Valley area and it's very easy to draw in North Valley area. I have no problem with North Valley area. If you live in south of North McCarran, you move out of Ward 4. If you live like Devon, Kurt Acres or near Sun Valley area, you have 50-50 chance to move out to new Ward or Ward 3 or Ward 6, depends on how we district process is. And now we're at Ward 2, is Councilman Juan Dewar will be affected as well because her districts come all the way mostly South Reno. And what happened if she lived on the 2 block from her home, and that will be a concern. Is I did draw out Ward 2 only South Reno only, but the problem is she lived north of us Ward 2. I did try to move her out to Ward 2, move it to Ward 1, but that's the problem. So if you have any question or problem with this, please let me know. I will try to get fix it a more Cherokee and a more Cherokee difference, okay? And make democracy happen.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great comment.
So knowledgeable.
Yes, very good.
Madam Chair, I don't have anyone else registered for public comment in person. Would anyone else in the room like to give public comment today? Would anyone on Zoom like to give public comment? If you'd like to give public comment on Zoom, please use the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom window. Give you just a second. Madam Chair, that concludes our public comment.
The next item we're going to go to is E3, approval of the agenda. Would anybody like to make a motion to approve the agenda this evening?
I move to approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
After a second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. approve of the minutes from March 21st. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Minutes.
I'll approve the minutes. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Don. All those in favor say aye.
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 Minutes from March 21st are approved. Okay. Now we're gonna go to Councilwoman Lewis for the council liaison. report.
All right, well, hi, everyone. Glad to see everyone here tonight. And you, Tyler, online. We have just begun what's considered to be the council break. What that means is we don't have a council meeting for about 4 or 5 weeks. From last Wednesday all the way to July 20th, which I think is the date of the next one. So what I'm doing is I'm having a lot of constituent meetings, even had them yesterday on the holiday. Trying to catch up on some stuff. I wanted to tell you though, some of my recent correspondence, a lot of correspondence on parks. And especially concerning about the Monty Ranch Park, I'm hearing from a lot of constituents. One of the things that I did during the budget was I highlighted the need for park maintenance at Monty Ranch Park, and I asked that they focus on Monty Ranch Park. No one else spoke up about any park except me. So I feel like, okay, I called it. I hope that to have money. I've even taken a tour of Monty Ranch Park with Nathan, who is Uliot, who is the new parks manager. We did close the budget. That was a major significant achievement. We did do Jack Thornley's review. Our city manager is overwhelmingly positive, and did give him the same raise as all the other employees, except we also gave him a bonus of 20 grand. We're very pleased with how things are going in the city, the councils. So that's a good thing to report on. I did have a chance to go to Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, as part of the mayor's conference, or it's called the Conference of Mayors. Our mayor has just become the president of the Conference of Mayors, which is remarkable in that we've just become a mid-sized city in the lexicon. And this is usually a big city kind of deal. The current president, or the just recent past president, is from Miami. He's actually told us he's planning to put in for running for president or vice president, depending. So the point is that it's a very high profile guy, and it was a pretty high profile position. They represent, when people in Washington want to know something about mayors, they often call the Conference of Mayors, and the president is the spokesperson. The mayor, our mayor, has been the vice president for the last year. And prior to that, she's been chair of one of the court committees that deals with entertainment, tourism, and sports. So anyway, one of the reasons they asked me to go was we also met with Columbus officials and got some tours, primarily of their river district and their parks, just to see how they do it. And of course, every state has different funding mechanisms. Money is available to do these things. We seem particularly restricted. That is why during our city manager's review, I proposed a number of goals for next year. And one of the goals was I proposed that we do a citizen ballot initiative for parks. And this would not go to the legislature. We already tried that route and they denied us. So there's no point going back to the well there. So what I proposed is that this one, I think you have to get so many signatures and get it on the ballot. It's a ballot question. It's not advisory. There are some questions that are advisory, but we would possibly be able to raise our own tax to fund parks. And so many people write to me about parks. I know there's a huge amount of support for our parks. Our parks were rather shredded in the 2010 timeframe during the recession. We lost about 60% of our staff, and they've been slowly rebuilding, but very slowly. And money for both capital improvements and maintenance is very hard to come by. So I don't know how to do this other than a new funding source. I mean, we have to come up with something. And on that note, in our ARPA money, we had about 25 million to allocate this time. We allocated 5 million, 2 million to soccer fields and 3 million to river corridor. And in fact, today I just met with our staff about this river corridor, they want to put out a RFP to get the river corridor planning started. And they told me tentatively allocating 300,000 to hire a consultant. And then I asked them what they thought the project cost, and nobody had an answer. Now, remember, we've allocated 3 million of this one-time money. And I had personally estimated somewhere between 70 and 100 million for a river park. Why? And I asked, and Carrie Koski, who's the Public Works Director, said she estimated that just the bike path, walking path would be about 30 million. And I asked also what the scope of this is, like how far upstream and downstream. And they said they're looking, Washoe County reached out to us to partner, and they're looking at all the way from the state line down to the Sparks line, because Sparks has not reached out to us to partner. And they're trying to really focus on downtown. My proposal, the reason the mayor and I proposed this $3 million was for the river. You know, everybody sort of made some proposals for the ARPA money. This was one of my proposals with the mayor. Is that the river's kind of the critical ribbon that distinguishes us. You know, there's two things in my mind that distinguish us from every town USA. And that is the mountains, you know, the fact that we're in a bowl, and this river. These are geographic things that kind of set the stage for Reno, Nevada. And the fact that you can fly fish downtown, that we have a kayak park, that you can raft through downtown, are all very unique things. So they asked me today on the meeting, you know, was I happy with the way that they were doing the RFP? And that included micromobility, meaning bike trails, walking trails, etc. Looked at parks. And the first thing that they said was, Callie, might not know.
Land use.
Land use. In other words, what kind of development should be along the river? I added a fourth thing today. I don't know if it'll get picked up, but I propose that safety be its own thing. Why? Because if people aren't safe, no matter how much money we spend, they're not coming downtown to the river park. They're just not going to do it. And that would include things like trash and park rangers, river rangers, and dealing with drugs, dealing with homeless, all the things. And how would we deal with them? I thought it should be a separate component, police presence, etc. I don't know. I'd love to hear what you all think. It turns out that the county, their source of funds, it turns out they were thinking about helping us was the opioid money. Well, it's pretty much you have to spend, if you're getting opioid money, you have to spend it on that. And that kind of fit in with having a public safety element in the parks, because, you know, one of the things that happens in these parks and downtown is drug use. And homelessness ties in with this drug use as well. But they're separate things, but they're related. And so anyway, I suggested that all of those public safety aspects should be added in as a separate thing to plan for. How many police, how many ambassadors, how many, you know, river rangers, how many bathrooms, all of that to me is part of public safety. So I just wanted to tell you, I mean, if this is a year for me for anything, it's probably parks. The next 2 years. I mean, I'm working on the park in Virginia Range. I've sponsored these 2 park projects, soccer fields and the river park. I'm proposing a ballot initiative on parks. I guess you could say there's a theme right now for me. It's that. So I wanted to mention all of that. There was something I'm concerned about, and that is that the legislature did a number of bills that had to do with tenant protections, evictions, reforming the process, various processes, doing an experiment with holding rents more steady for people that are 62 and older or are disabled, I guess what they call it. The governor vetoed all of those bills. I think there was one bill that passed through. There was a proposal to give us money, $3 million, Sparks $3 million, Southern Nevada, 15, 20, 12 million. And so that did pass. So they're willing to give us money, but not willing to change the structural issues.
Let me interrupt.
Yeah.
I don't understand. We've had rent control in New York City since the 60s.
Yeah.
Why is this an issue? Especially with regards to elderly people.
Yeah.
And retirees, part of part of our core population are people who come here from other places because it's a good place for them to be and to be elderly.
Right.
And they are a very needy population. If you're gonna take care of anybody, I don't understand why this should be controversial at all.
Well, two things. I met with a gentleman yesterday about my private work. And he said he's from another state, happened to come into Reno. He met with us on our business. But he said that, kind of funny what he said. He said that a guy had approached him and suggested to him that he be on his local city council. And then he wanted a quid pro quo. He wanted some rezoning done for the guy that was approaching him, wanted some rezoning. Well, if I get you on city council, we'll get you rezoned. And I said, interesting. I said, I often find that the people with money have the wherewithal to affect change. I focus on all the people that don't have money, that need help, that are being evicted, that have cars on their street, that are having speeding problems, that have development issues. That's where the focus is for me. I'm not out there helping. The wealthier people can hire lawyers, advocates, lobbyists. They can speak well on their own. They have money. And you know, that's just kind of how I guess I've approached this job. Well, this man was completely taken aback. He's like, oh my gosh, I'm a public servant. And I said, well, what else am I doing? So I agree with you. I'm very focused. And when I read that the governor vetoed this, I actually had tears in my eyes because this is like an issue I've been dealing with the whole time on council. Very few tools. An example of one of the things they would have fixed is every other state. I feel like it's almost like a Passover saying. Passover, you say, on every other day we do X, but on this day we do Y. Well, in every other state, the way you start an eviction is that the person that wants to evict you files something in court. Not in Reno, Nevada, right? In Reno, Nevada, in Nevada. Nevada, they file something, but you get a little letter. Doesn't look very important, but it's your eviction notice and you've got to go to court to stop it. It's completely backwards in virtually every state. So, and there's many other things that are not fair, right? What we would call fair. And I myself testified before the session on interim committee that they should do something for seniors because I'm dealing with seniors in affordable housing who are leaving because their rents are going up, even in affordable housing. One of them that I'm familiar with in our ward, 30% in 3 years. And the reason they can go up is because the annual median income goes up. It's recalculated every year. And as long as you are X percent of that, let's say 60% of that, well, that might have been one number when you started, but if it goes up, let's say a bunch, 60% of a new number is a new number for your rent. And so that's why I proposed the legislature in my 3 minutes to take an action to deal with seniors, especially in affordable, as a starting. Let's try it. I mean, everybody says it won't work. You say, why wasn't it? Well, they believe that it's caused disinvestment, meaning less investment in downtown New York, okay, or any place that has rent control. And what was being proposed here was not rent control, but rather they called it rent stabilization. But the basic concept was you can have your rent go up, but just by a certain percent. It couldn't go up 30%, let's say in 3 years. That would be year over year more than, let's say, 5 or 10%. And I think in the bill it included 10%, as I recall, for this certain population. So anyway, I was kind of put back on my heels because I'm like, oh my gosh, and that's got to live with this world now for a few more years. And I'm sorry, Governor, but this is me on the ground dealing with our constituents, our residents, our people that need help. And I don't know the right answer, but I think we should instead of getting so polarized about this is the answer and it won't work, right? The two things that we should experiment a little and try something. Okay, trying a subpopulation in a certain way, see if that works. What works? I don't know until you try. Like you can try and you can fail, and then maybe we'll say, okay, we'll roll that back. We won't do that anymore. But if we never do anything, we're just here. And it has been reported and reported and reported that our rents continue to be amongst the highest growth in the country. So I have all kind of people tell me they're moving out of Reno. Like, I don't want to lose these people. Like, I value all the people from all the walks of life at all the price points, at all the different jobs. I think that's the complex that makes Reno. So those are just some struggles that I'm dealing with. Anyone else want to make some commentary? I'm sorry, very rarely on a soapbox, if you will. But right now, parks and what's happened to people at their homes are heavy on my mind.
I'm sorry. Part of what bothers me here is we pay the price anyway. You don't want to pay the price for what we're doing with regards to the bills that you're paying it anyway. If people can't find housing and we end up taking care of them down by the river because they're homeless, it still costs us money.
Right.
So let's see if we can find a way to effectively use the money we've got available to help people who have lived in our communities for 50, 60 years,
Exactly.
have been productive people. And at this point, you know, they've earned it.
Right.
They've earned it.
Right.
If we have minor, reasonable, increase in rents, maybe we'll somewhat track
Mhm.
with increase in social security,
Right, yes.
everything kind of goes up together at that point. It seems so unreasonable. It's like they're being punished for getting old.
And we can talk about this all day long till we're blue in the face, and we have a council, we've struggled, tried to figure out the right answers. We've read polemics, we've read studies, we've read everything. I even got a council member sent me a document today, said, here's an idea, I don't know if I agree with it, but it's a struggle, we don't know what to do. And so I would like, anyone else, I'd love to hear any other thoughts on this.
I have a thought.
What's that?
I have a thought,
Yes,
not surprisingly. I know the Title 18 review is coming up. I know ADUs are back on the table. I know all of these things. But when the first Title 18 revision was happening, and I participated in every single public meeting and council meetings and planning commission. And I repeatedly wanted Title 18 to put something in there that gives back. So we have, I'll just use a little tiny example, the intersection of Mount Rose and Plymouth Street. And you back up from Mount Rose to the south, and somebody's gonna stuff 47 units in there about, 10
Oh,
foot
I
from the
saw it.
stoplight.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
so
they
that goes to
cleared
planning commission. Right, so it goes there. Now, they've got the density bonus for small units. Look at their unit size. I mean, if you look at what they calculated, it's kind of creepy, but they're like 3 feet under per each unit to be under this thing to get the density bonus. Now, in my mind, that totally defeats the intent of the density bonus, sort of like Sierra Senior Care. Oh, but we're making a lot of studios. They'll be more affordable. That's not really it. And it seems to me that if you're going to get a density bonus benefit by cutting 5 square feet out of your 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom apartment complex, Title 18 should require some certain number equivalent to the percent density bonus that you get to maintain rents at least minimum workforce housing level, because then there's no entitlement. They can't pull that one about, oh, it's an entitlement, we're stuck for 30 years. But in return, we get nothing for the density bonus except more people,
right.
which is fine, but it's not at a lower rent.
Well, and if I may, Donna, so I did look into this recently on an apartment complex that was over by Idlewild. And as I recall, the number they had to be under was 1,800 square feet. And I don't recall the bedroom size, but I said 1,800 square feet
It's big.
is a big house.
It's almost the same size as my
I
house.
lived in a 2,100 square foot house. This was an apartment. And I thought the density bonus should be like at 1,000 square foot, right? That we should drop it. And that's something, I know there's some people here from planning, but I thought if you want a bonus, then go do.
You want a
small
bonus,
unit.
give us something back. You get to put in more units, but at least for that percentage, 10% of your bonus units, they have to be held to a certain below everybody else's
Okay,
for a particular
like it.
population.
we're gonna hear about Title 18 today, so
Yeah.
that's good. Anyone else have a comment on all of this? I can't believe you're not speaking.
Honestly, I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
The governor's vetoes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, think how hard they worked on these bills to get consensus to pass the bill. And and apparently the governor struck a new high for 75 bills.
Right at the end,
Vetoes.
Yeah,
when you don't even have time to comment on what he's doing.
Well, I mean, you get next year, right? Can't they do a veto override at the beginning of 2 years from now?
In the first 10 days,
Yeah.
2025, yeah.
Yeah, long time from now.
Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah,
To me, it just seems like, we're just in this big vortex. We just keep going around in circles and we're not, as our community has come together and the legislator came together and everybody's trying to put together some kind of solution. Is that, for me, it's pretty sad that one person can shoot all that down with all this hard work that everybody's doing. But at the same time, it's like, okay, if you're gonna veto this bill, then what
What's
is your
your answer?
answer? And what's
I
your
had the same
answer?
thought.
Then you're gonna veto this, all right, then come step up to the table here, Governor, and tell us, what's your solution for this?
Yeah.
Or are you putting together some kind of a committee or some kind of a something?
Yeah.
So that we can try to get some resolutions because these issues aren't going to change.
Well, and they're felt most strongly right here at city council, right? I mean, we're the closest to the people at local government. We're the ones they're calling. They're not calling their congressperson. Sometimes they might. I can't get a place to live, but it's mostly us. And I have very few things to give them. Call Washoe County Legal Services, call Nevada Legal Services. And they said that they're expecting many more people to go homeless, right? I mean, that have never been homeless. Like, why would we want to do something gonna increase homeless? It's tough.
I have another comment about as it affects people who are disabled, and I argued this throughout the whole Title 18 thing. Revitalize downtown, blah, blah, blah. Yet, if you have a disability of any sort, you can't occupy these places that are being built. Because the way the code reads is you don't have to have handicap parking unless you have a handicap designated unit.
I
But
did not know that.
yes, and I brought it to council, I brought it
I did not
everywhere.
know that.
It's so unfair to people with disabilities of any age. But
But
you cannot. I can pull the references, but you cannot, there's no requirement that there be a handicap accessible unit. Therefore, there's no handicap parking. So when I've been disabled because I tore my ACL, I really couldn't walk. So I couldn't have even accessed my own apartment to drive my groceries home, even though I didn't need bars on the bathtub. You know what I mean? I
Gotcha.
couldn't have even done that.
Yeah,
And so they have the parking situation downtown, so they're building so many of these new units. They're building for a different population.
Correct.
And again, if you're gonna overbuild to bring in the population, there should be a requirement, put in a handicap unit at every, even for a
Every 10 or
fourplex, but if it's 4 units and below, you don't have to do anything.
Okay.
You don't even have to provide enough parking.
well, it's interesting you mentioned that because we just did a thing with Riverside, Zero Riverside.
Yeah.
Where we're entering into a negotiation, and I brought up, not in the meeting, but after the meeting with everyone, look. What about the people that work there? What about people that are handicapped? What about people that have visitors? What about deliveries? I
Got
mean,
no
all
place
of
to
these
go.
people need to park. And if there's not even one parking spot per unit, never mind per bedroom. You're already 20 down per bedroom. You are another 10 down for every other thing. Anyway, I came up with that. They're like 30 or 40 down, not 10, but like 30 or
A
40.
lot, I know.
There's no on-street parking right there. There's like 8 spots, which is good, but it's not enough to cover like 40 more people that need to park. And that pushes out to the neighborhood. And I even said, so why should the neighborhood be cheering that this Zero Riverside is gonna be built? What amenity, what improvement is it bringing to their life?
Nobody wants it.
It's only a detriment to their life so far, other than you maybe get rid of homeless people camping on that vacant lot, which is a positive.
I did see that council meetings, made some really good comments.
Yeah.
That I was
Good.
glad about, but it's like, what do we think about what we're doing here? Oh, well, the code says we don't have to provide parking. Same thing with the thing I just mentioned south of Mount Rose, right? You look at what they're talking about, they have 2-bedroom apartments in there that are going in. They say, oh, we're not gonna impact traffic because we only have 14 daily trips. But they have how many bedrooms? It's not 14 daily trips and it's about 15 feet from the stoplight. And if you've ever driven on that street regularly, you know it's not easy to get through there between Plum, and California.
Right.
And it's like, it's a shell game. And it needs to be cleaned up because they're gonna do that. They need handicap parking in there so that
Yeah.
people who are disabled or don't want to live in a single family home anymore and are trying to downsize, want to stay in their neighborhood, they can't.
Yeah.
Because there's no handicap parking space, there's no access. There's no price point. They didn't have to give us anything
Yeah.
for the extra bonus density, that density bonus they got. And that's what would help. When I don't want to take care of my house anymore, I still want to live downtown, but I'm not gonna be able to, because I'm not gonna be able to walk. I'm not gonna be able to park and then walk to wherever I rent.
Well, I appreciate all this conversation. For our audience, we don't usually have this level of conversation about these things. Because we usually have a lot of development projects on our agenda and we don't have any tonight, so we took a few extra minutes. Just to talk philosophically about some issues that are facing the city. So with that, Madam Chair, I'll cede my time back to you or
Thank you.
hand it back to you.
You know what, absolutely fantastic and much needed conversation this evening about current affairs
Yeah.
that are, what's old is new again,
Parks and parking.
right?
Well, and when we have developments that come before us, these are the kinds of issues we should be thinking about as we consider those.
Right, and so I talked to the manager about a development agreement for Riverside. And we did direct the group to do a few things. Parking wasn't one of them, but there were a number of other things that were addressed. So love to see where they land and if we're happy with the compromise.
Thank you. Great,
Okay, back to you.
great comments by everybody too this evening. Thank you. All right, we're gonna move on to item number A6, and that's gonna be our staff liaison report. Hi there.
Hello, everyone. Tyler Shaw, Community Liaison for the record. I have a very short update for you all today. The next Ward 2 Neighborhood Advisory Board meeting will be on Tuesday, July 18th. Same time, 5:30 PM, same location, the Moana Nursery Seminar Room, which is where we all are today. Please let me know if you have any questions, but that's the end of my update.
Okay, our next, we're gonna move on to section B, the business items. This is gonna be a presentation and discussing regarding the 2023 redistricting process to create 6 wards in the city of Reno, including county providing. And it looks like we have Miss Kelly Wilson with us. this evening.
Do you mind if I sit with you?
That's fine. And Kelly, I was hoping when you may not have planned this, but I was hoping you could show them the place to draw your own.
Yeah, I think if we have the access here, we can totally do it. I have some screenshots in the presentation, so we can see if that's enough. If not, we can try to pull it up live. Well, thank you, everybody.
It looks very small compared to. Can we pull this back?
Yeah, we can pull back once the slides start, it gets a little bigger.
So what's Tyler, just for the record, Callie Wilson, Director of Policy and Strategy. Thanks so much for having me here tonight. What you saw up on the screen is a flyer that is passed out around the room and was also in the front. But we will go ahead and get going with the presentation. So here's what we're here tonight to talk to you about the 2023 redistricting process. And here's kind of what you can expect to learn tonight. So we're going to talk about an overview of the process and why we're redistricting again this year. We're going to talk about the rules for drawing the map. I'm hoping that when you leave today, you'll have a better understanding of the timeline and the many ways that you can have an influence in this process and participate in it. At the end, I'm hoping not only to answer your questions about the process, but to hear a discussion from you all about the neighborhoods in Ward 2. So we'll make sure we have some time at that, and that'll become a little bit more clear throughout the presentation. So Kylie, let's go to the next slide. So redistricting is the process of redrawing our ward boundaries that make up the city of Reno. So right now we have 5 wards and we are scheduled to go to 6 wards in 2024. Our city charter requires this transition. And our city charter is essentially the city's constitutional document. It's the thing that says we get to exist as a city and here's the authority that you have. The other important thing that I think to note is we're not talking about annexing. This is not about getting bigger as a city. It's the current footprint that we have as the city, and we're just breaking it up into a different way, 6 different groups rather than 5 different groups. And this process is really important as it determines which neighborhoods and communities are grouped together for the purposes of electing our council members who serve on the city council. Next slide. So why are we doing it again this year? Didn't we just do this a few years ago? Well, the answer to that is yes. You would be correct. But we're in a unique situation. So usually every decade after the census, All jurisdictions go through a redistricting process where their goal is really to balance the populations of their wards or districts or whatever the jurisdiction is called. Our unique situation is different this year in 2023. So back in 2016, our charter committee, which is a citizen committee similar to a neighborhood advisory board, recommended to change from 5 to 6 wards. Their reasoning behind this recommendation was that it would, by reducing the number of people that each council member would represent, the goal is to be more responsive to its residents. So that's really kind of what we're after here in changing from 5 to 6 wards. This recommendation was supported by the council at that time and by the state legislator. The bill was passed in 2017 and signed by the governor. And that bill stated that the change would occur in 2024. So that's why we're here today, going through the process of figuring out how to redraw these wards. Next. And so not only does it change the number of wards, but it changes the composition of your city council. So right now, what your city council looks like is you have 7 members on the city council. You have a mayor and an at-large member. Both of those members must live in the city of Reno somewhere, and they are elected by all voters throughout the entire city. And then you have 5 ward council members. They must live in the ward that they represent. And they are elected by just the voters of that ward. When this transition is complete, they'll still have 7 members on the council, but that composition will look slightly different. You'll still have the mayor, but now you'll have 6 ward council members who must live in their ward, and they are elected by the voters of that ward. So that new 6th ward kind of replaces the at-large member. Let's talk about a little timeline about how this will all work. So the full transition will take about 1.5 years-ish from when we started. So right now we are going through the redistricting process, which is redrawing our boundaries. And this is going to take us through about August. We must deliver our maps to the Washoe County Registrar of Voters by September 1st of this year. And that is needed to build in a lot, that time is needed to prepare for the 2024 election cycle. We have a presidential election coming up, and so there's a lot of deadlines that are moved up into the fall of this year that our registrar of voters has to be prepared for. She has to draw new precincts, she has to get notices out. There's a lot of work that goes into it. So our ward boundaries need to be to that office by September 1st. And so for all purposes necessary to carry out the election. Candidate filing, so people know if they want to run, where they live, where you live, so you know what ward you'll be voting in. These maps will be in effect for the 2024 election, but the transition won't be complete until that Ward 6 council member is sworn into office after the 2024 election. Next slide. So let's talk about the redistricting process and our approach. So our commitment is to be transparent, to be community informed and data driven. That's going to be the process that we've committed to the community. And the fundamental components of this are to be driven by redistricting principles. Those are kind of the rules in which we have to follow. We're going to use data and analysis to support those principles, and it's going to be informed by you and the rest of our community through the process. As with the ward redistricting process that we did in 2021, the city again has partnered with Flow Analytics. It's an independent GIS data analytics firm that takes all of the feedback and helps us prepare maps and run the community engagement process. So let's talk a little bit about what this looks like. So the process we'll follow starts with data collection. It's kind of in the phase we're in now. We're collecting data and we're collecting community input. And we're going to dive really deep into the community input process here in a few slides. But what we're doing is we're going to take the first level of input that we get, and we're preparing to draft some maps based on the first feedback that we get through the end of this week. Then we are going to present those draft maps to the community. And we're going to put those out to the community and say, how's it? Take a look at these. Are they good, bad? Where did we miss the mark? Give us some thoughts. Then we're going to go back and revise those maps and present final map options to the community in later July. And those maps will then go to council in August. So our process really is meant to be designed so that we're trying to have everyone have the opportunity to have their voice heard in this process, but also to make sure that we hit those important deadlines to make sure that your election process here locally is not impacted and can be run effectively by our registrar of voters. Let's talk about these redistricting principles. So redistricting is governed by laws at the federal, state, local levels. So we break them up just for us to help wrap our heads around them into the musts and the shoulds. Earlier this year, council adopted these principles, which are used as our guiding rules that we follow when we're drafting these maps. So the first one is we must be in compliance with all local, state, and federal laws, including the Voting Rights Act. We must be nearly equal in population. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. The wards must be geographically contiguous. We must retain current council members with existing terms that extend beyond the 2024 general election. So I want to pause and explain this one a little bit because this one can get a little bit confusing. So what we're saying here is Councilmember Dewar, who represents Ward 2, and Councilmember Ebert, who represents Ward 4, were elected in 2022 for a 4-year term. So their term goes to 2026. So they get to stay as council members through 2026 because the voters, that is what the voters voted for. So even though their lines may be redrawn, they will be retained in wards 2 and 4 after this process. Wards 1, 3, 5, and 6 are up for election in 2024. So those are all the seats that will be on ballots next year for the local city council. During this process, we must solicit input from the community. It's one of the guiding principles that council set for us. And the 2020 census must be used as the data source that we will be using to draw these ward boundaries. When we talk about the shoulds, we do our very best to preserve neighborhood integrity. We should preserve the use of existing natural boundaries, and we should be as compact as possible. We're going to talk a little bit more about all of these in the next few slides. So right now, based on our 2020 census, our total city population is 264,000 people. So when we talk about the ideal or target population, when we break that up, we just divide it by 6, it would be about 44,000 people in each ward. Right now, under the 5-ward scenario, that target is about 53,800. So we're going to have to adjust each ward by about 9,800 people. Now, that's not a perfect science because right now all the wards aren't perfectly equal. You'll never be able to kind of get perfect population across the slate of wards, but that's kind of what we're looking at big picture. Next slide, please. So really one of the chief criteria when we do redistricting is about balancing population. And there's 2 things that we like to make sure that everybody knows about. One is we use total population. So there are other ways to look at population, right? Citizen, voting age, the number of voters. We use total population according to the census. That's best practice and the requirements kind of across the country. Now, like we were talking about getting exactly equal populations, we're never going to get there. We use census blocks. So the city's charter requires a deviation of 5% or less. That's our target. So when we can only have kind of all of our wards be within 5% or less total of each other. When we talk with our consultants who do this around the country, we have a pretty strict deviation requirement. They say it's kind of average that they see 10% around the country. So we really kind of try to bring home that balancing population aspect. Next slide, please. So we will have some geographic criteria when we are looking at these. We look at contiguity. So we like to say no islands except for the real islands, which should be connected by bridges, tunnels, or ferries. There are a few, I think that there's one in the Ward 4 area and maybe one out in Ward 5, where there's actually a little portion of land that's actually not connected. And there's some rules in charter that allow you to kind of really put those in any ward, but then you have to kind of talk about compactness with it and some of the other rules. So it doesn't play a huge role, but except we wouldn't We wouldn't build a map that says something up in North Valleys is Ward 2 along with Damani Ranch area. And we wouldn't say both of those are Ward 2 unless the whole area put together is touching it as Ward 2. When we talk about compactness, what we're talking about is trying to make sure that wards are just not unnecessarily thin or serpentine. I hate to use this word when we're talking about redistricting, but this is often what people will refer to as gerrymandering. When we talk with our consultants about compactness, it really comes down to a visual test. A lot of the court cases around this really kind of look at it visually. There is data that we will look at that can give you measures around it. But at the end of the day, we're going to be looking at the compactness from the visual method. And then when we draw some of these lines, we're going to be looking at existing natural boundaries. So major streets and roads, rivers, lakes, already existing districts, lines that have already been used as boundaries is going to be kind of our starting point and where we would like to do that, because that's where people naturally will know, oh, I'm on the north side of this road, south side of this road, or the river, or whatever that may be. Another key component of redistricting, is voting rights and our demographics. So there are actually legal requirements that are at odds when we talk about demographics. 14th Amendment to our Constitution prohibits the use of race and ethnicity data to draw ward boundaries. However, the Voting Rights Act requires consideration of race and ethnicity data to avoid vote dilution. So our consultants who've again kind of done this throughout, they take a look at the voting age population across the city and look to see if we can create a minority majority ward based on our population and where minority populations live in the city. If that is feasible and in balance with some of the other rules, they do look at that and present that as one of the options. Next slide.
And say those words because they're confusing, minority, majority.
Yeah, so probably for the city of Reno, our Hispanic population is growing the most. We've reached 25%. Of our total population. And so when we would have a minority majority in a ward, that would be 50% of the people who, at least 50% of the people who live in that ward would be Hispanic. Hispanic or the other demographic. For Reno right now, based on where we're trending, it would likely be our Latino population.
That was confusing to me.
Did I do better?
You can do better. I mean, I know you, I've heard it. It was confusing to me what you just said, I guess. Okay, so like, if you're. I mean, I don't know. I understood it one other time that you said it, but this time I just got lost. You have like the majority group. So if we're saying that we have ballpark this, the city as a whole has 75% Caucasian and 25% Hispanic.
Sure.
So then, does this mean that the target would be to have the majority be the majority and the 25% of each ward should have, or that's
No.
what I'm not understanding.
No, great question. What they look at is geographically, whether if one of our
Options or something.
minority populations lives in a condensed enough area where in like this geographic region of the
Then
city,
they're the majority.
that they are the majority, that they become the majority of one ward.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
yeah, of course.
Now, do we have that now?
The consultants are looking at it.
No, I mean today's world.
We do not. It
Right.
does not, we do not have a minority majority district currently.
And one of the reasons I think is that in terms of the Latino population, they're spread out.
Yes.
They're spread out in all the wards. There's not one place that they only live. I mean, I have a significant portion in Ward 2. I mean,
Mhm.
every place has a pretty good,
That's exactly right.
so there's no place they're living condensed enough to draw a ward and meet these criteria of being compact. And not serpentine and all this.
Yes, that is correct.
Does that make sense?
I think it's also the argument of why we push so hard for 6 wards versus having an at-large, because you can get closer to having more representative democracy at the city level.
Definitely true. All right, we're going to talk about communities of interest. This is our last piece of analysis, and then we're really going to talk about how this plays into community feedback. So a community of interest, there is no legal definition of this, right? This is a scenario of how we talk about it, but a community of interest is really a community of mutual or shared interest that shares a common social or economic interest that can be drawn on a map. That's kind of key, that we can draw the group on the map. This may be a special district, so it could be a, everybody pays into a water district. It could be an HOA, like we want to keep everybody in one HOA in one ward. It could be a neighborhood, and how you define your neighborhood may be different. That could be, based on my history here, this is how I define a neighborhood or my neighborhood. It could be something to do with shared cultural heritage. So these are really populations that have common needs and interests. And what we try to do in the redistricting process is make sure or do our best to not break them up. We like to do our best to try to keep those communities of interest together with the theory behind it that the elected official will have whoever's serving that community, it'll be kind of one cohesive voice for that area and not broken up unless there's an intention to do that. We can talk a little bit about that afterwards. All right, so let's talk about how community of interest leads in to the public input. So here's the input timeline. We are currently in phase one. And phase one will wrap up this week. And right now we're focused on hearing about your communities of interest. We want to know how you define your neighborhoods, how you define where you live, and the areas in which you would want to keep them together. I will say, so we have we're asking for feedback on this first phase by this Thursday, June 22nd. I will say the tools are not closing. We will still look after, we still have them open and we'll be looking after them. We're just moving to the next phase with our community meeting next Tuesday. So I wanted to be clear that between those 5 days, we may not be able to look at it and capture it in that first period because we are drafting some maps based on everything that we learned through the 22nd. So we're focused on communities of interest right now. Then we're going to move to phase two. So next week, we are actually going to release those preliminary map options. There will be several based on things that we heard from the community. And then we're going to put them out, and there's going to be different ways to participate. After the community meeting, we will have a series. They'll be online. There'll be a new survey. We will also have Districtor, which we're going to talk about. And we're also going to have what we call drop-in sessions. So these are sessions where we will promote them throughout the community, and they're not meetings where you have to listen to me drone on like I am right now. They're more like, we will be there for 2 hours at this location. Come in and talk to us. We'll have the maps up. You can have one-on-one conversations. You can give us your feedback then. But so we'll just kind of be there based on a kind of a 2-hour block. And you can come in at any point during that time. We'll still answer your questions, but you don't have to listen to me. You don't have to show up right at the beginning. And we're going to ask for feedback on that through July 14th. And we're going to take all that feedback, everything that we've learned from phase one and phase two, and we're going to revise those maps. And then we're going to have another community meeting on July 27th. And that meeting is when we will release the final maps to the community. And those maps are what will go to council for their discussion in August. Go to the next slide.
Right, I have a question.
Okay.
Sarah. So at this point, what you're saying is any ability of the NABs at this point to put their position before you dies on Thursday?
No, thanks for the clarification. So the answer to that is no. So that's why I was saying the tools stay open. We are just saying between June 27th, this Thursday and next Tuesday, we are going to be developing maps. So
I know what you're doing. My question is, did we get enough notice that we should have,
so
we
we,
should be working on decision?
yeah, so we sent out noticing
Postcards.
postcards to everybody in the city
Okay, I mean,
in May.
you may be right. So,
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, as you can see here, I know that Ward 2 kind of happens later in the month, unfortunately. But we've kind of been to the other meetings as well. We're trying to do our best to do everything.
No,
I am encouraging you to still use those tools because we still are going to look. I've had experiences where somebody will say, I submitted it 5 minutes ago before your meeting, and I'm like, sorry, okay, I'll look later. So we're just trying to put some general highlights in so you know kind of what we're doing in that.
So
Yeah,
these
I
are,
understand.
words via email.
Yeah,
So give us some examples.
Of communities of interest. Can
Like,
we,
how would you say the words to describe your community? I mean, would you say, we all shop at Moline and Lakeside? Like that's our hub, those are coffee shops, that's
yeah,
where we
you
hang
can,
out.
you could say, I really feel like my community of interest is the area bound by. Now I'm being really tested on my street names
Oh.
growing up here. I should know these, but I'm like, you know, it was Joe's house where we used to throw that party. So you know, so you could give us the street names to say, and then you could say, and the reason that I feel that this is a community of interest is because this is where all of the families that go to this elementary school are. This is where we all have a shared heritage of something. So you could easily describe it in an email to us. And we have some additional tools that also make it easier.
Let's say that, and I'm a little deficit in words, but let's say, I'm just gonna use, we have a Muslim community,
Mhm.
which is a religion, but it's also a culture. And let's say Ward 2, somewhere, there's a center for Muslim culture. Like, I have to know, just outside Ward 2, until recently, we had the largest Asian population, as a good example. We had 6%, something like that, were Asian. Do we, so that could be a subset within Ward 2, and you could say, this is my area, I've got the Asian grocery store right there, one you go to sometimes on Virginia. And I've been there too and met people there. And here's 4 restaurants are all serving food, and that's because we all hang out here together. I mean, is that an example?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the most helpful for us is to be able to kind of define, help us understand that where it is on a map. So street names are
Okay.
helpful. The geography is helpful. Definitely, we want to know why, so we can kind of help explain it to others. But the geography on the map is really beneficial, but that can come in either on a map, which we'll talk about here in a minute, or it can be an email. It can also be a phone call to Reno Direct. They're logging them as well. So if you want to call and say, hey, log this feedback, let the redistricting team know this, they'll ask, you know, this is my neighborhood, they'll log it for you. Tyler, we go to 2. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so right now, when we're talking about communities of interest, a couple of ways. We just talked about the last bullet, how to send comments to redistricting at reno.gov. That's the email address for you to send anything to. You can attend a redistricting meeting, which you're at one now. We're going to talk about Districtor in a second, where you can draw your own boundaries. And we also have a survey up. Next slide, please. So the community of interest survey is really it's a survey that walks you through identifying your community of interest in a step-by-step fashion. And you guys have a great advocate on your NAB who reminded me of this tool, and and we brought it back. There was some good feedback when we initially launched the next tool, and after speaking with your member Keats, we brought a tool back that we're hoping is more beneficial to some people who don't want to be as involved in completely drawing ward boundaries. So this tool kind of walks you through some questions about what is your community of interest. And there is a map, a simple map that just allows you to draw it on there.
Without getting technical with GIS.
Without getting technical with GIS. You can also just describe it in the box. So that's one way to tell us. The next slide, please. So Districtor. So I will kind of jump up there and talk a little bit about Districtor. So Districtor is a new tool. What we heard from the community when we did this in 2021 was some folks really wanted to like get into drawing the ward boundaries and kind of see the challenges and help draw them out. So Districtor is a tool that actually lets you draw and play with your own ward boundaries. So this is what it looks like. Draw your own boundaries. So you can actually draw the full 6 ward map. You can also put a community of interest on this and just do one little area if you want it. It is definitely more freeform. There's more detail, more map kind of knowledge that goes with it. And there's no questions that kind of walk you through it. But so if you're going to use it, we definitely recommend we have tools on reno.gov/redistricting that detail how to use these and to read the rules a little bit more specifically that help you draw a map that meet those rules. The other interesting thing and kind of fun thing about Districtor is it allows for those maps that the community has submitted for you to actually see them. So these are, back when I took the screenshot, 5 maps that people had already submitted that kind of let you see what people are thinking. And this is what kind of jumps in when you start to draw your map. So I started just to kind of play with it just for the purposes of this presentation, but ultimately what you do is you click on the paint tool, which would be up here, and you select a color. There's just 6 colors for it to be able to work. And you just start literally highlighting the map, and it just starts updating for you. And as you're coloring in sections or census blocks, the bar starts to increase, so you can see what the population is of that colored area. So you can kind of see, I have 3 little populations that I highlighted. I never finished this map, so I don't even know if this would work. But so you can kind of try to get to that ideal population. I don't have a screenshot of this, but when you click on data layers on the live version, there are different things that you can see that can help you with this. We have like the elementary, middle, and high school zoning districts. We have data around where PUDs and tentative maps have been approved, so you can see kind of those types of neighborhoods. So there's different types of data that are layered there that aren't necessarily on, but some people, it will help kind of if you want to look at those that way. So that is Districtor. Kinds of fun way. And the other thing that's interesting is if you want to play with it and kind of go into that level of detail, you can see that it's a bit of a puzzle to make all of the rules work in the best way. And that at the end of this, there's going to be compromise. We're never going to have probably a perfect map that everybody's exactly happen or that every neighborhood is perfectly, and we're going to just have to compromise at the end. That's why we go through this process to do as much as we can. Excellent. Here are the June meetings. You can see we're at the Ward 2 NAB, and we're prepping to get to that June 27th community meeting. It'll be at Reno City Hall, but it's also hybrid. So there's a Zoom link. If you go to the website, you can sign up for the Zoom. Next.
Let me ask a question on that. I did have a friend listen in on the first one. I was out of town, but they said that they couldn't hear. That it was in the city hall and that the audio was really bad and that it made them like just hang up.
So we did have some audio issues. We also had some visual issues. The cameras apparently weren't working either. We are working with our IT team to do our best. I can never promise that if we won't have technical issues. I didn't think we were going to have them. We ran through the mics at the first meeting. It was dipping in and out, which is definitely annoying. We're doing trial runs to make sure.
Are you looking at a different venue like conference room 7 or something?
We were looking at some different venues. There's some other challenges and some other ones. We thought about switching to McKinley, but they've also ran into some audio issues recently. And so we're trying. I will pitch this. Make sure to sign up for our newsletter because if we change it, and make sure to follow City of Reno social media because we'll be blasting it out if we change the location. I don't have a great solution. We're trying. We think we have it fixed. We also know I need my consultant to talk into the mic a little bit stronger. So a couple of
Maybe
things.
they
we're
should
working
wear
on. Yeah, we might give them a handheld rather than have them stand at the podium. So
Let me ask you, you're cutting this off Thursday and you're gonna be working Friday, but I wouldn't be shocked if you got stuff on Friday. It's a natural cutoff to the week.
Yeah.
I've had people tell me they're submitting Friday.
that's fine.
I mean, I know you're already gonna start playing, but be aware about, I think in particular Friday more than any other day. Friday.
It would be totally fair.
Okay.
We're still keeping
It's
an eye
not
on it.
Tuesday at,
Like I said, it's just more of the example of like, somebody says, well, I submitted my thing,
Yeah.
today. And I'm like,
Yeah.
we've already prepared the presentation and the website's ready to rock and roll. So we're just trying to let people know that we have like that little bit of time. Last slide. Tonight, I'm here to answer your questions, and I'm hoping we can talk about communities of interest.
Madam Chair, it looks like we have some public comment. Please start by saying your name.
Hi, Audrey Keller, and yes, maybe the only one in the room that's already been through redistricting in my prior city that I lived in. We went through a very similar process. We have the exact same population base at 250,000. And for we're 85% Hispanic. So we have a different census tract. It was a very interesting process and good report that you did, but I do have a couple of follow-on questions. Your phase one, which is cutting off from public input. Do you have an idea about how many public comments you actually received so far? How much input have you gotten?
Up to now.
Christy?
73.
73
You've
left.
gotten 73 public comments. We do not have the count of the maps because that goes by consultants. And that includes, so, well, I would suggest as a data analyst myself, that 73 out of a 250,000 that you're having to cut off this week isn't a very high percentage of response, just saying, not 1%. It's tiny. That's of interest because you're gonna redistrict for a long time, once you get to that point. So just an input, 73 is not a big number to consider for 250,000 population. The other question I had was, when you do the redistricting, does the method of voting at city council change? Because you'll have 6 council members. What happens in the vote? Do you get a tie and the mayor is a breaker?
No, all 7 vote.
7, you have 7 vote. Okay, that's a little different.
We have 7 now, we'll have 7 later, unless the charter changes at some future date. But for now, and any charter change has to be approved by the legislature. And this year they didn't approve a charter change that was proposed. They may not in the future. We can also change our charter. Remember I mentioned the Parks ballot initiative? We can also change our charter just with our own initiative without going to the legislature.
Okay, so I have a community of interest suggestion. I live in Ranchera and my community of interest has to do with equestrians. And because Ranchera has an equestrian facility, and surrounding that facility are other equestrian zoned homes. So what I was wondering is, well, could I give you that information and say, all homes that are equestrian zoned, in other words, they're little ranchettes that have horse potential or ranches. Can you look the community up by that and say, this is a community of interest? Can you create that?
So what my suggestion would be for you and I maybe to talk afterwards and we can just draw it on the map together, kind of in your view, what that would be.
I'm too new. I just moved here a year ago. I don't know what that is, but I know there are like horse properties.
Yeah, I think a proxy measure would be larger lots. So
Okay.
pretty much to have horses, you have to have over an acre. And I think if you could, there's a
So you
lot
can
of
go
horse
large
properties
on
in the county.
Yes.
But there are other ones in the city, like I happen to live in a neighborhood not far from here that allows horses because all the lots are 2 acres.
Right.
Or they're over 1 and under 2, so that's their size, mine is almost 2. And you can be actually bigger than 2, so I know people have 4. So, and a lot of those people have corrals, horses, et cetera.
Right, and there might be businesses in the area that are also equestrian based, so. That would be my community of interest, I just wouldn't know how to put that on your mapping application. In my prior city, a lot of us got on the maps and did a lot of map playing, and it is not intuitive to get to those numbers, so that you have basically 42,000 at a minimum, 45,000 at the top end. That's, if you start doing that and manipulating it, we lived on a harbor on an ocean, we had these really long snaky shapes. it's a weird process. So if you haven't gotten on that GIS software, try it, because it's a learning experience. And then the last thing I would say was, do you have an execution plan once the districting is completed? Because what happened in our city was the information got changed, but the maps on all the city website information didn't get changed. So you need a transition plan. So you're working on the front end, but equally you need the back end to, so that the public knows, hey, I'm no longer in District 2, I'm in District whatever. And then, you have an interesting overlay with, Councilmember Dewar. So you have to live in the district to be the representative, unless, like yourself, if they shift the district, now you don't live in the district.
They can't shift it. That was her main thing.
Yeah,
I have to be in a district. Now, I had a question. Is it called Ward 2 or could it be called Ward 1 or Ward 3?
so theoretically, for Councilmember Dewar and Councilmember Ebert, we could switch 2 and 4. We won't do that because that will cause just unnecessary confusion. But
You're leaning to keep the numbering.
leaning to keep the numbering, and the rationale for that is confusion. And our charter, right, is very specific that wards 2, 4, and the mayor are voted in the same election year. 1, 3, 5, and 6 are voted in the other election year. So we can't really kind of flip, if we were to relabel Councilmember Dewar's current neighborhood Ward 1, that would throw off the election cycle.
Election, everything.
So-
That's a good point.
Yeah, so we wouldn't do that.
That was a question that I had. So after the map is redrawn, her residence will still be in the district that she's representing, like it has to.
So-
But not the same, 10,000 less.
So there'll be 10,000
Yeah.
less in Ward 2.
Right.
Ish, yes, so there will be some residents who at the end of this, who are currently Ward 2, who will no longer be represented. by
No,
Councilmember
like my residence,
Fact,
I meant like her
20%.
house, like where she lives,
Oh, yeah.
still has to be in.
That's correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Donna?
So I have a very difficult question for you both, so for all of you, so because of Ward 2, it's mostly on the South Reno side, and you live on 2 block away. And I did redraw a map on District R that caught up any Waterville area you talked about, in this area over here, moving to Ward 1. But that's it's a really difficult, challenging, because you live on the north,
One end.
one end of a Ward 2, and the north of Wine Lanes over here is Ward 1.
So Ward 1 might have to be called Ward 2.
Yeah, I think so.
And let me point out, could you put up that slide that showed like 5 or 6? And I don't know if we can blow up that slide, probably not, but I was hoping we could, this one. A lot of these options have the South Reno being a new ward.
Mhm.
Whether it's yellow or purple is separated from the central area. Every one of them has a.
Yeah,
So I think people have recognized what you're saying and made the assumption that they would create a new ward, five options here. And it would probably not be called Ward 2 because I'm in Ward 2 and it
Yeah.
doesn't include me. So it'd have to be a different number.
yeah, so my big question is, if Ward 2 is in South Reno, guess,
Ward 2 is not going to be in South Reno.
not gonna be in South
can't be.
Reno.
And Ward 2 has to be where Councilmember Dewar lives.
Oh, I have to cancel Dewar live and cancel Maggie Eber live, because
Correct.
easily for like where the councilman or councilwoman Megan Gruber was live at No Valley area.
Right.
Doesn't, and no, most of No Valley area doesn't have to worry about the redistrict because they have their own districts.
Yeah.
So it's only like losing like
Yeah.
just a low some point of her districts. Thanks.
My turn? Thank you. Okay, this goes to you, this issue. Initially, I heard you say at council and on the early meetings was that these wards don't necessarily have the same number. So now we've decided, let's just keep 2 and 4,
Yes.
called 2 and 4.
And we originally thought, we actually didn't think we we
Yeah, no.
needed to. We were kind of like, I don't think there's no like state law that says like the numbering system.
To avoid confusion.
To avoid confusion I was always like, let's try to limit that as much as possible. There's no point in just like messing with people's numbers
No.
to mess with people's
So,
numbers.
so, because you had even said a couple of meetings ago, well, we may not even be called Ward 2 anymore.
I did say that.
Yeah, so,
But we remember 10,000 people not in
Understood.
Ward 2, so they won't be in them.
right, so I guess you've kind of answered this question, but Naomi lives X, really close to here. Wherever she lives has to be in a ward that she will represent. That's what we're saying, right? Now, the fact that when she was recently reelected, Ward 2 didn't have the same boundaries. So a lot of the people who elected Councilwoman Dorr are down here. So we're retaining her as a council member, possibly for what used to be Ward 2, Virginia Lake, and crossing over into where Jenny now is, coming north,
Sure.
because you have that. So she'll be representing a ward who is not primarily composed of the people who elected her. So this obligation lives only to keeping council people in a ward to represent, but it does not have any obligation to the people who elected the council member.
That is correct.
Okay,
And,
just to be clear.
There's a simple solution to this. We don't have Ward 2. We don't have Ward 4. We have the Dorr Ward.
oh, by the way, guys, I know this area over here, so over Palm Lake used to be a Ward 2,
They
Good,
and then. used to be-
elected me twice.
yeah.
They let you try the mojo, this area over here overwhelmingly voted for you twice.
Right.
Before the redistricting.
Just not 3 times.
Ward 1, and I'm not be surprised if this area, but for, I guess, Gene Burger, because that area doesn't like Gene Burger, so they definitely like you, so.
Okay.
I definitely will move to Palm Lake at Ward 2.
Well, regardless of who likes who, at the end of the day, there's only 2 of us that will be still in place come 2024 at the election. The only people not on the ballot is the mayor, me, and Megan Eber. So regardless of whether you like us or don't like us, we're staying.
Right.
And we'll see, I'll be seeing my last term, she's seeing her first term, mayor will be seeing her last term. So that's the layout.
So like if there was enough population north of where Councilwoman Ebert lives to make 40-something thousand people, you could cut her off at her house and give her downtown. I mean, theoretically.
Theoretically,
Yeah, so they are not attached to their
Let's just
ward
live here.
numbers.
yeah.
I mean,
But wherever they live, whatever ends up there, that'll have their ward number on.
By the way, so, and the.
Because
there-
she's still gonna be called Ward 2, no matter where she goes.
By the way, we have a council member who lives in Towntown area. So his name is Kathy Taylor, so she lives in Towntown area,
right,
so.
Yeah.
So up to Towntown, you cannot reach up to Towntown, we know, so
no, I could actually, so
You could,
Callie has explained, I could go all the way into downtown, I could go all the way to where Councilmember Taylor lives. And she would end up being in our ward, she wouldn't be eligible for election unless she moved. She has to move a month, she'd have to live in her new ward a month before, anybody would. A month before you file, 30 days, my recollection.
A lot of the feedback, I call them the arms, right? We're seeing is you kind of start here, work your way until you get to that target population. Work your way down till you get to that target population, work your way up till you get to that target population. And then it's, what do you do for the remaining three? We're seeing a lot of those variations of comments. And then it kind of starts to look at where are those neighborhoods? How do we preserve as much as we can, keep as many kind of comments together that we
I mean,
can.
I'll give you an example. I've already had people, it's not about me per se, but it is. I've had people call me, I live in South Reno, and they go, how do we retain you as our council member, right? And I'm like, well, I'm very honored. I'd love to be your council member. However, given this scenario and the practicalities, you probably are, we're not probably gonna be together, frankly. I mean, given all the permutations here. So they're getting their mind around that. I mean, they're not so very happy because, right, we just had an election. You know, anyway, a large number of them voted this way, so we'll see.
That orange on the map, because I can't see what that is that supposed to be? the
That's
new-
Ward 2 today.
Current Ward 2 as
That
it
is
is
the
today.
current Ward 2.
Yes.
And you're talking about the south portion of Ward 2 is gonna get lopped off.
Possibly, all those options, all 5 or 6 options showed that.
By the way, speaking to the Southwest, we know, all we, one lady told me, who live in Con Ranch area, who live in Ward 1, about 27 years. They say like, I could move to Ward 2, but they say, oh my gosh, I want to retain Ward 1, so I guess you want, here's a solution for you, so because if someone need to withdraw Ward 1, give us Ward 1 to Ward 2, and then Ward 1 goes draw all the way to Northwest Reno and Somerset. Over here, we know down we live, I think that down we could get the new ward.
Well, here's the thing, I think it's good to not think about the new ward. Because all the numbers are like alphabet soup. For example, they could call the new orange, let's call the south up Ward 1.
Yep.
Would still be next to Ward 2, probably.
Yep.
They, in other words, start from the bottom up, Ward 1, Ward 2, Ward 3, and then you'd retain almost all the numbers. They could call that orange if they did separate it out, Ward 6. Okay, they could retain almost everybody's numbers, 4, 5, 2, 3, and just have Ward 6 at the orange. So there's no presumption about numbers either, other than we just learned today that they are trying to keep 2 and 4 still labeled 2 and 4, i.e.
It's
not
one
even
of
the
those
ward.
weird puzzle pieces where I was reading the charter and I go, no, actually, I don't think that's right. I think I have to keep
It was a
2 and
very
4.
astute observation because otherwise we're thrown into a different election
Election.
cycle.
Yeah,
Crazy.
so
And it's confusing when we're having these discussions. You know, are you talking about the old Ward 2 and the new Ward 2?
We also just had that a year ago.
I know.
Okay, like, and I just wanted to point out, this is a great map that Callie showed here. Because what she shows on this map were the areas that changed. I'll give you an example. This orange used to not be orange, it was green. But it has hash marks, it became part of Ward 2. This green was not green, it was orange. It has hash marks because it became green. Okay, then it was orange, but it left. This area was green and left. This area blue was part of Ward 2, orange, it left. It went to Ward 1. This area here, this shaded area of blue, I'm not sure where it left.
Agree.
When, you remember, Kelly, I don't know. Here's some other examples that I've shaping. And each of these, like this used to be Ward 1 and it went to Ward 5. Shaded. And some of these, I think this was part of Ward, I'm not sure, it looks like it was a part of Ward, 4 and it went to 5.
Yeah.
This green was Ward, I don't know, because the way you've drawn it, I'm not sure.
I can't remember.
So, Councilman, when I talked to Councilman Martinez, have a meeting one-on-one. With Councilman Martinez, they say like they want to keep as a northeast, because they talked about a lot. They're working on a lot more on northeast, on Chilliwack Park and the West Avenue district. So they're like, they have no reputation, they were a new whole area, Ward 3, so I guess, for me, my prediction is to move you out of Ward 3 and moving to Ward 2, Ward 1, maybe Ward 6.
Yeah, talking about communities of interest and keeping parts of the ward together. The Lake Ridge area has a lot going on with the development plans that they want to get for the old gym site, tennis club site. It seems like there are some pressing reasons why certain portions of Ward 2 should be kept together for governance purposes.
It was controversial, there's gotta be a future thing. If you suddenly like cut that area out and moved it somewhere else, that means other people would be deciding.
Yeah.
I see what
And
you're saying.
how does a shared interest in,
How a region develops.
yeah, how is that translated into a community of interest? It kind of follows along with the ranchera.
Yeah.
Most of the horse properties that you're talking about, because I live right across the street on Bondi Lane. Most of the horse properties are in county. They're not annexed into the city, so there's no way to include them as horse properties or as part of the
District.
community of interest. Because you're kind of adjacent to a different entity. But it is development. Should we just say we all go to the Starbucks on the corner of Lakeside and McCarran and we all have coffee there, so we should all be in the same?
Yeah, I mean, I think we heard last time Lake Ridge was one of the areas that actually was proposed to be split in one of the map options 2 years ago. And when we came here, we heard from this body and others that, hey, that won't work for a lot of the reasons that you're talking about. And that's not one of the maps that was recommended or proposed. So we don't look at it like the demographers that we hired don't know those things, right? So like that has to kind of be teased out through the process of identifying the community of interest. I wrote Lake Ridge down, but I also had it from my notes from 2021 too.
I was gonna ask, do you have still all those comments
I
from
do.
2021? Because there's a lot.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of feedback on that.
Yeah, so I still have the
And they're still
comments.
relevant,
And they
Yeah.
are, yeah, so I still have those as part of.
I mean,
this
you
process.
couldn't do a perfect map. I mean, let's just use an example. Oscar Delgado, Ward 3, lived all the way south at the very, very almost orange-green line. He had to be in a different ward than me. You know, maybe our ward should have included more orange, you know, more of the green and less of the blue,
Right,
or something.
but we couldn't at
But
that
they
time.
couldn't at that time because he was there. He's not there now. He's not on the council. It gives more freedom.
So, yeah, so Council Montier live in Dawn Spring area,
Right.
doesn't live in South Ends.
Right.
Corners,
So
so
it
I
gives
think
more-
that this is more opportunity for redistrict, like take the blue owl.
But I'm gonna remind you of something.
No, take the green one out of.
Miguel Martinez could end up in Ward 2. There's no requirement that his ward be exclusive of my ward. The only people, Kathleen Taylor and Miguel could be in Ward 2. That's the way these rules of this game work. So they don't have to do what we had to do last time. Because it's a new world.
Now I have a question about the public input process. You guys have come to you've been going to the NAB meetings and then with the report of there's been 73, people that have been involved or doing that. And with us being in government for billions of years now, and so understanding, I think the issue, it's a shame to me that more people aren't involved with this redistricting, but I think the big crux of it is they don't understand it. And so I think, I don't know if there's any opportunity at this point to let people know why they should be involved. Or, because I think one, they don't understand it, and two, I don't know if they feel that they have a say or it really, how it affects them. I don't know if they even care that it affects them that, oh, I'm in Ward 2 versus Ward 3. With just, citizens that are going back, community members that are just going about their regular lives.
Let's ask this. Do you recall how many people participated last round?
Just for clarification, some people make comment, we don't know how many people have submitted maps.
Or surveys.
Well, I didn't count the maps. And when I counted about 3 or 4 days ago, there were about 10 maps that were finalized, and there were about 10 maps that were still in draft.
Wow.
There were like 20 maps at that time. There could be a lot
I just
more.
wanted to clarify.
Thank you.
Well, I thought of how do we get more people involved in this process? With them understanding,
Round 2,
I mean, I am all ears, right? We spent, we did the largest noticing ever in the city's history for this process.
Right.
We've done media like crazy, social
Where?
media like crazy,
No,
on all the,
The news station?
yeah.
It
I mean,
says
I've done a-
redistricting, but I think what's, you know, in my, and just knowing that we've been involved in government, and done a lot of ballot questions and done a lot of public input processes. I think for me personally, it doesn't say why they should be involved and why, and how this affects them. It just says we're doing it.
Why this matters?
Yeah, okay,
To
they're
you?
doing it, great.
It's a
But,
very good.
but it's like, well, how does, you know, why should this, you know, why should I be involved and how does this affect me? And then maybe you go back to, and I think because of the way the voter thing is right now, which is a pretty hot topic, is that, you know, you have, maybe you say, it's a very good possibility that, you know, your ward can change and it could change your voting status, or it could change who you vote for. Why you, so I ask, you know, why they should be
Or even
involved.
if you vote. I mean, let me give you an example.
Yeah, if you go. So why you should be involved and how it's going to affect you. But just by giving a notice out that says we're doing this, I think a lot of people are discounting it because they're thinking that, oh, they're redistricting, but they don't understand it, and two, they don't know how it's going to.
So, thank you. I'll just leave it at that. It's a challenge.
100%.
Yeah, I've vetted, I don't know, I don't know the magic bullet.
It takes a village, and you know, and I talked to my husband, and my husband's like, well, are we still gonna be a ward two? And I said, well, I don't know. I said, we may or we may not be. And he goes, oh. So we, you know, and he said, well, could we get a different council member? And I said, possibly. And he goes, well, who's it gonna be? And I said, we don't know. Right? So I think people don't understand the complexity that, yes, your council person could change. And, you know, so that there's a lot of things that are going to affect them, but I don't think they realize what.
Well, let me give you an example of one sec, Donna. Let's say South Reno becomes its own ward, a version of South Reno. Well, they just voted 2 years ago for me. They would get to vote again. When I first ran, it was what they called an open seat, which didn't have a pre-existing person in there. I had 6 opponents, so there were 7 people running. Another district had 9 people running. So when you have these open seats, more people are encouraged or less afraid to run because they figure, well, I don't have to beat back an incumbent. You know, it's all fair and love and war. You know, I got a shot. And so it does, if this does mean that South Reno becomes a ward, there will probably be a heavy duty competition for the ward, I would guess.
Yeah.
Just like there was when I first ran in 2014.
We're all involved in the process. We're getting down in the weeds. But who decides at the end of this, what maps go to the registrar?
The council.
The council. We elected you guys. Most of the people out there trust their elected representatives to make the right decisions. And don't get down in the weeds in this stuff because it takes too much of their time.
Right.
Yes, they're going to be affected and maybe they won't be happy with the outcome because of forces beyond their control. But this is what representative government is about. Nielsen sends $5 in there. They used to when they sent out diaries. They'd send $5 along with the diary and say, here's a $5 bill. Please fill out this diary about what you're watching on TV. They send out 3,000 boxes. They get back 200,
Right, no, correct.
150. So even with the financial incentive, response rates are low.
I agree. But you know, after the council does decide what their map is, and people hear that they are now in a new ward, and they're like, what the hell? What is
It's going down.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm just saying, like, perhaps maybe right at this stage while you still are doing the input process, you know, you can tell them why they should do it and how it affects. The why and how, that's my only suggestion.
No, I appreciate the feedback.
It's hard. We've kind of been in your shoes with some of the stuff that Councilman and I have done in the past, and it's brutal. I applaud you.
But by the way, your demographics person, whether they actually need to not be involved. I mean, they need to be working off what we send them.
That's right.
It's your right. If we don't actively get involved in this process, then shame on us. I don't want people, I want people that have got the expertise and who have no dog in the hunt, okay? Those are exactly the people I want, because later on, this gets into litigation, they're not a problem.
Could be. We made it through last time when I litigated.
I have, just one comment.
Yeah.
Which I think I've told you, we've talked about this, about the segment of people that wants to have a blank map and then majority of people whose heads are explode, because what, I'm just supposed to pick 6 places and draw lines on here? And I know that there were a lot of people who attended the public meetings last time, more than this time. And I think that people are much better at being reactive.
Yeah.
So when you get past Thursday and you get into next week, that would be a good time to notice everything about, we have proposed changes to the composition of your city council. I mean, you know, some splashy headline,
Yeah,
because at that point, then people will become reactive. And those,
it's easier to respond to seeing maps.
correct,
I agree with
like,
that.
we're gonna do this, we need the 6th ward, we just chucked off this whole bunch of South Reno, because that makes a nice population package, we moved Naomi back where she was, and Jenny's can't run again, so we took over some of her area. And it would be easier to whiteboard it all out on the one-on-ones, but people are better about being reactive, because as I explained to you, that blank map thing, when that was the only choice, I'm like, and I'm looking at the maps going, there are people doing this who know GIS, who have a political agenda. I can see that by how the maps are drawn. So how are the rest of us supposed to deal with this, you know? And so I think when you get to the reactive part, if you put it out there with something more splashy, you know, like Mimi was saying, like, this is how it's gonna affect you, or you may have a new council person, you know, something like that. And have the news media like announce it in a different way, not just like the city's redistricting, because everybody got confused last time. Nobody knew, am I in a new ward or not a new ward? People went to
I
the wrong
hate to
board
tell you this,
meeting.
I don't have control of the media.
No,
Not anymore.
No, I understand that, but what I mean is, you know, what goes out, because you do notice you have big mailing lists, but you need to find a way to get beyond your existing email list so that people who don't pay attention to the city, you know, I don't know, can't you staple onto Virginia Lake Park, staple onto telephone poles or something? Sorry.
Post no bills.
Will the city council be given a number of maps to choose from?
Yes, that is the plan. So last time we gave them, I want to say 3 or 4 options. With kind of a pro and con to say, here's what we heard from the community. These maps were able to meet these, they all met legal requirements. But we said, these maps were able to meet this, these ones didn't meet this, and they talked about that.
But the maps that are presented to the city council will already have been chosen by your department, and then they will not be able to make any changes. They're just making a decision on which map would be best.
The council does have the authority to direct us to change. That's what happened last time. We presented a couple of options and they had an issue with the downtown area. And so they requested us to adjust that. So we brought that back with them.
Even
So
at the
change.
council meeting, we asked for changes.
Can you
And
please state your name for the record? Sorry. Can you state your name for the record?
Oh, I'm sorry, Carmen Gage.
Thank you, Carmen.
The maps do have to have 2 votes. Maps are adopted by ordinance for the city of Reno. So first reading and an adoption, and it's a supermajority vote, 5/7 of the council has to pass it.
And I mean, worst case, if we have them tinkering and we could have a special meeting just to do it. Meet the deadline.
Right.
Can't.
What do you mean?
So because it's an ordinance,
Yeah.
our charter ordinances cannot be done in a special meeting.
Even a first hearing? Really?
Yeah. So I could look at that. That may be different.
Yeah. Because let's say you have first meeting in August and we say, no, make changes. You could have a special meeting, maybe to introduce the ordinance, and then at the final would be the final meeting in August or something.
Yeah, I could double check.
Let's double check.
I could double check that. The other piece is if the first meeting in August, council provides some sort of direction that we need to come back for first reading again. We can still meet our timeline because we can get after first reading the maps to the registrar for her to start her process. And upon adoption in the first
So
reading in
as long as
September.
sometime in August, we have a first reading. we
Yes.
Still need to.
Because the second reading, the end of the day, if the city reading, the council were to make significant changes to the map, we'd really have to start the process over. The timelines
Exactly.
blown out the window anyway. But I have talked with the registrar, if that occurs, we could adopt in September. And I would still get her what she needs to begin her process by September 1st. That's
Are
my
you
legal.
getting comments? I mean, you're getting comments by individuals. Are you getting comments by organizations?
We have not received a lot of comments from organizations.
Okay, I'm just curious.
Yeah.
My suggestion would be to go into some of your smaller organizations, for example, I'm not sure, is it Frank, who lives in Lake Ridge? Well, I live in Ranchera. I couldn't fathom that Lake Ridge would be in a different district than Ranchera. We're touching communities. And the commonality is we all have HOAs. So your HOA would be a subgroup. And you might reach out to a smaller group to say, hey, you're in risk of being redistricted. Because then you're communicating a sense of urgency to a smaller subgroup. You know, if I got 200 members out of Ranchera to respond, it would over double the response rate. So that's just a suggestion of how to reach out.
And if anybody has contact information, let's say for an HOA, we are happy to reach out to them. So at the city of Reno, we don't manage HOAs. We don't have them, like unless
But the
we know
property
them.
managers,
But what I'm saying, we don't, because we don't manage them, so we, like, we have a list of certain things.
Well, I would
I don't know
actually
the
reverse
HOAs.
what you said. I would go with some of the larger HOAs. So for example, Double Diamond, if this is, so far we've seen 5, 6 maps and they all have South Reno as a new district. Well, the people in Double Diamond should know that. People in Damani Ranch should know that. The thing is, Double Diamond has a master association. The Damani Ranch does not. They have all these smaller subsets of HOAs. And,
If people are on Zoom listening to this, are they able to have input as well?
Yes, so Zoom participants, if you would like to comment on this item, please raise your hand using the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom window. And just for the record, this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the city's YouTube, and public comments can be received outside of when the meeting is happening. So any comments that we receive related to redistricting will be forwarded to the redistricting team. And the public commenters from the last 2 comments were Audrey Keller and Carmen Gage. Perfect, thank you.
Thank you for your presentation.
You did a great job,
The time that you spent, you know, helping answering our questions and going through a very thorough process. It's a daunting task. We're so appreciative of all
Understand
the
it better
staff
every time you
hard
do
work.
it.
Me too.
You've really done a great job. Thank you.
Well, thank you guys. Definitely appreciate your feedback. Look forward to.
You know, and if anybody, you know, there's the meeting calendar, you know, if anybody wants to go and maybe do some of these, the different community meetings where they're doing, you know, where it's open, where it's 2 hours, you can go and maybe, you know, have, if you have more questions or you want to see more, don't see the staff at these community meetings, like community meeting number 2 and especially community meeting number 3, because you should have draft maps by then, right?
Yeah, we will have draft maps next week.
Okay, so if you guys are, you know, interested in the draft maps, then hit the girls up at the staff at community meeting number 2 and number 3, so you can see these draft maps and kind of get an idea of what these 6 wards could possibly look like.
I don't think this became real until you came here today.
Yeah.
Can you recap again?
What?
About do you see
Timeline?
like the
Timeline.
different option on ward maps?
Next week, so at the community meeting number 2, they're going to have draft maps of some potential different ward districts.
Okay, thank you.
So
the
I don't
schedule
think this
yet?
became real for this
Drop-ins.
group, Callie, until you came here. No matter how much noticing you did, I never noticed the date, that the date would be cut off 2 days after our NAP meeting. So I think you should expect at least input from this group through
Great.
Friday. Just expect it. I mean, I don't know if any of them plan to comment, but
Yeah,
you know,
and like I said, I was trying to be intentional about saying like. The tools will remain available. We still go in and look at them. what I'm trying to avoid is we do need a couple of days and we're gonna work throughout the weekends
Obviously.
to get this done, right? What we've done is shorten our period of time to create the maps. Right, we're giving ourselves ultimately 5 days to prepare maps and present them to the community. So what we've done is we've taken it on ourselves to really kind of make our window of work time small, which means I've asked my team and our consultants to work late and work weekends in order to kind of make the comment time as long as I could.
And I do encourage like our citizens here and our board members here too, to go into the mapping tool and submit your thoughts on what you think would be good for.
For free-handed,
Yeah.
but the tool helps you because it gives you how many people.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's a critical.
Yeah,
And if you have a community of interest that you feel that should be brought to their attention, and certainly fill that form out as well and submit that. So, but take this opportunity to be a part of this and, let's have our voices heard as well.
Thank you. Fantastic job, Kelly.
Appreciate you all. Great discussion, everybody. Thank you so much for your inputs and for your patience and for your questions. Definitely a daunting task. And now we're going to go into item B2, presentation and discussion of the City of Reno staff on Title 18 zoning code cleanup. This is going to be another engaging discussion.
I'm gonna come up here because I can't be very fun, realize in Callie's presentation. First, I wanted to address Donna's comments because she brought up a good point. So ADA parking is 4 and under units. It's an ADA designated unit. 5 or more does have ADA and parking requirements for multifamily.
Are you saying 5, if your apartment complex has 5,
5 or more.
then you would have a handicap spot?
Correct. And it's.
But the
it's upgraded.
fourplexes and such don't, and all the ADU things, the duplexes, the fourplexes, the triplexes that are all trying to be packed around.
Imagine if you have a 4-plex and no one is, needs a handicap, but you have one designated out of 4 spots, that's limiting as well.
Perhaps, but also means people who need one can't move into any place like that.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think that mirrors good building codes, I'm actually gonna look into that where it comes from, and then the density bonus, so I'm sure you know this, but we have 2 density bonus options. One is for affordability, and so if you are providing units as an AMI, you get the density bonus. The unit size density bonus is a tiered system, so it starts at 1,800, and the idea with that is like simple Econ 101 supply and demand. You raise the supply and the demand goes down and naturally the price goes down. And so we gave people those 2 options and that was our attempt at truly just trying to amp up the supply. So you can't go through the affordability process, which can be a tedious process to get HUD funding and official certified affordable unit can be tough. We'll say, fine, if you can just provide the density that ultimately that's what we need. Can also get that density bonus. So if that's not working, we can look into that, but I found that we have been able to kind of pull some more density out of these lots that maybe are suited for the high density. And if you have examples that you're like, this is just a mess, it's not working, then I think we should have some.
Yeah, we should chat, because
Yeah.
that
Oh, yes, I will.
That density bonus, it's the one, I mean, it was argued about, no, we're not doing entitlements, blah, blah, that went over and over and over. This other thing where developers just cut I swear to God, it's 5 square feet off of each unit in order to get a 10% increase in the number of units. The parking is ridiculous. Plymouth Street is, I mean, there's no place to park around there, all gonna be on the street, and they're not giving anything back except density. Okay, great, we want density. Now, there's an operating theory that more units reduces prices. I've seen no evidence of that since all this building has been going on in the last 2 years. We have tons of new units. Prices continue to increase. Studio apartments are unaffordable now. So to say my whole thing is going to be studio apartments so I can make it really dense, those rents are not lower just because they're smaller. They're
So I think she's basically saying the premise upon which this is.
not
Yes.
working, and we
And
should
it's
look at
not,
it.
So far in the last 4 years has not proven it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And our demand has not reduced, to be fair. So we're still getting an influx of people.
More demand and
Supply.
higher prices. So let's start getting something back for what we're giving up.
Right, and so I'll get in my presentation, but I did want to address those.
Thank you.
And to introduce myself, my name is Grace McAdin. I'm a senior management analyst with Development Services. And I'm here tonight to kind of discuss our zoning code cleanup. I'm going to go to the first slide, please. And so in 2021, we adopted a new zoning code. This was a full overhaul, full rewrite. This process took quite a while, and the goals of this process were to help implement our master plan. We have this great master plan and our zoning code is fairly outdated. And so we looked at our master plan, we did community outreach, and we really wanted to have a zoning code that actually reflected our master plan. As part of this process, we hired Clarion Consulting to do an assessment of our zoning code at the time and a recommendation, and then they actually did the right for us. This was about a 3-year process. Through that, we also hired a technical, or not hired, sorry, we organized a technical advisory committee where we kind of proposed ideas. We went through those ideas of how would you apply this? You know, if you're applying for a conditional use permit, how are you going to read the section of code? And is that consistent with how we're reading that section of code? As part of this process, it was always intended that we would do that. And so it's very rare that you adopted a code or you adopt anything and it's perfect and all of your problems go away. And so we're kind of taking the theory of incrementalism, where incrementally we're going to have this rewrite that we did, which was a full overhaul. We don't want to do that again, but we want to incrementally get better. And so staff, I guess we go to the next slide. And so, like I said, the intent was that this new adoption was to streamline, simplify, reorganize and update development standards, improve the user friendliness, revise development review processes and procedures. So if anyone remembers our old zoning code, it was about 2,000 pages, and our new zoning code is about 600. So still 700 pages. Still a lengthy document, but much better. And we provided some images, which have been very helpful. And I think the biggest improvement, in my opinion, is snapshot development standard snapshots. And so if you know the zoning of your house, you can go to this one page and it will tell you, if you're in MF14, it will tell you how many dwelling units per acre, what your setbacks are, what the height limits are, all in one page. In our old zoning code, you had to go to like 200 different pages to figure out what your setbacks are. And it told you 5 different things. So we're really happy, truly, with this new adoption or new zoning code that we adopted in 2021. Slide, please. So something I want to keep in mind, or want everyone to keep in mind through this process and through my presentation, is really that there's 2 buckets of zoning code cleanup items. And so we have our true zoning code cleanup. Staff has been keeping a list. It's up to about 600 items now, things that we found while implementing this zoning code that are either inconsistent, grammatical errors, spelling errors, really just simple things of, oh, well, it says this over here, but it also says this over here, or we don't define semi-opaque. What is semi-opaque mean? How come we're using it in this section while also using it in this section? So we have a list of about 600 things. We've also taken note of things community members have called in and said, I don't understand this. This is confusing. Then we have city council priorities. And so I'll get into the list later. But this is kind of a bigger list of bigger policy items that city council has identified as priorities that they would like us to take on. We're not tackling all of that in this cleanup because it doesn't make sense. But these are things that would be new introductions to our zoning code. Those are things we would like to really focus on individually. Maybe hire a consultant depending on the weight of that item. Slide, please. And so the zoning code cleanup, which is the first bucket we discussed, consists of the following. It consists of grammatical items, inconsistencies, unintended changes. And so what that means is, we did this whole overhaul and we forgot to bring over maybe a standard that really was working in our old zoning code, or we thought it was going to work one way and it's ended up having an unintended consequence that we maybe didn't foresee. And then larger items, we'll get into these bigger items in the next slide. So some of these larger items include things like hidden Easter eggs. And that's our fun way of saying we keep finding these things that we just now are realizing are in our zoning code, that maybe don't make sense. One of those things is, I have a couple examples. So public park or recreation areas. So in all districts except PGOS, which is parks, greenways, and open space, ball courts, ball fields, and parking areas shall comply with the following standards. So the first couple standards make sense. Lights shall be shielded, makes sense. Courts and parking areas shall be screened from adjacent residentially zoned properties. All court and parking area lighting greater than 3 feet in height shall be subject to site plan review. I think that that might be fine. The problem is this is nowhere near our site plan review section. And so when you're looking to see, you know, what kind of things you trigger, and then all of a sudden you get into this additional use standards and you see I trigger a site plan review. We ended up having to retroactively take things through the site plan review process. It all worked out. It just needs to be cleaned up.
Well, are you saying move it to another section or are you saying delete it?
I don't know. And that's kind of what we'll find out through this process. Is 3 feet the threshold? Why is 3 feet the threshold? And where did that come from? Is it a different jurisdiction or Washoe County? I think at the least it needs to be moved or just copied over to the site plan review section. So another example of these Easter eggs is additional standards for multifamily districts. So reduced setback requirements with a conditional use permit. And it says any project requiring a conditional use permit in a multifamily district shall have a minimum 20-foot setback from any property line abutting a single family district. So what that doesn't say is that any property that doesn't trigger a conditional use permit also has to meet those increased setbacks. So kind of a.
Wait, say that again?
So it says that any property that triggers a conditional use permit has to meet increased setbacks. But if you don't trigger a conditional use permit, you don't have to meet those setbacks. So it's missing a piece to that. So we need to clean that up.
Okay, just to be clear, isn't it that if you have a multifamily next to a single family, you have to have a larger setback for compatibility thing, right?
There's other areas that would allude to that, but black and white in the code, that
Doesn't actually say
You
that.
don't trigger a conditional use permit. And this will be in districts like suburban mixed use. So it will be in more intense districts because usually you'll get the abutting zones.
Right.
But if the use is abutting a residential.
Well, let me give you an example, and why I voted against the 18 on Lakeside. It abutted a single family, district. And they only had a 5-foot setback. And I said they should have a larger setback. It was really important to me. And I said that they should not have 18 units, they should have 15 or 14 rather, for, you know, the MF 14. And, they had a higher number, which meant that they were right up on top of, and they were 3 stories high, as I recall. So there were things that I felt made it very incompatible. I voted against it because of that. People think I'm against infill. No. I just wanted it slightly reduced, a bigger setback and, like lose 2 units. And with those 2 units, you could gain more parking, you could do your setback. You know, that's what I was after, not to make the whole thing go away.
Nobody wants to go out in their backyard and have a 3-story building
But they
5 feet from the
did.
fence,
I
right?
mean, they even appealed and they lost.
I think, so because you use that as an example, I just want to ask you, is the issue here that you're saying only if it requires a conditional use
That's the way
permit?
it's written.
Yeah.
That's the way it's.
And that's what where the problem is, because really any abutting districts like that follow the compatibility issue or,
And they probably should have done what I said,
of course.
but they insisted that no, it's a MF 21 and it only needs 5-foot setback and we're done.
Yeah,
We've got that going on all over the city, as you know.
yeah.
It's
So
been
this
driving-
is,
It is bad.
this was one of the problems, obviously, that when we read it, we went, oh, that's
But everything requires it, so why does that say, yeah?
exactly. So it didn't make sense.
But everything isn't requiring it, and I feel like if they go to change this to everything, any place you have multifamily hitting single family, that should be a 20-foot setback, I'm gonna give you a probability that would not be approved.
Probably not, but that's what the right thing to do would be.
No, well, maybe we find a middle ground, right?
That'd be nice.
Of something where this clearly doesn't make sense, because it's saying if you trigger a conditional use permit, you have to meet a weird standard. It's not consistent with the rest of our code, as you had mentioned.
So you're basically saying that has nothing to do with the conditional use permit or not.
That's it, and that's kind of how I think that is. It doesn't really matter if it needs a conditional use permit. If it's a budding single family, it's a budding single family.
Maybe it was the thresholds for a CUP. Those thresholds that require conditional use, they felt.
And some of those thresholds are unit count.
Right.
So I think that maybe was the thinking there, but when you read that, it doesn't
Doesn't make
make
sense.
sense. And then we've had complaints too, to Councilmember Dewar's point of incompatibility.
You get it everywhere, down by the river, those new proposals going on there, and they're doing it everywhere, just approving it anyway. But hey, that's my backyard and now I don't get any sun. Well, we don't care. We're putting multifamily here.
Right. So accounting for that, with the update, I think.
Another example is the one at Idlewild. That
That's what I was
we
talking
did
about,
not. They had multifamily abutting single family with like a 5 or 10 foot setback, wasn't 20. And I also voted no on that one because again, it was just, and that one had a 4, but you know, so we denied it.
Right.
The other one we approved, so.
Yeah, so there's countless examples of how that's been misused. Next slide, please.
Yeah, question over here on the stuff.
I'm hearing all this, it just makes me wonder how, and I don't know, maybe I'm getting on this. I'm on a different track here, but there is an apartment that was just recently built, a multi-family apartment, right on the street here. It's back into another multi-family. I swear, if people reached out, they could shake hands to the window.
Oh, I know exactly.
It's horrible. I cannot believe that they allowed that to happen.
I could not either, and I asked the permitting director to come see this. I'd like to understand what you have approved and what you built.
Well, not only that, what about the people who originally owned that property? They're just, nobody's gonna wanna live there when you have this thing behind you that you can't even have light coming into your window.
Right, I mean.
You'll notice
I mean,
so-
I just understand what's going on with the city.
5 foot,
Some of these.
I have it.
it's right on Plumas.
Across from the golf
It's
course.
just what couple of blocks.
It's across from the golf course,
But is it north of Urban? It's north of,
south. I think.
It's south of Urban.
south of Urban. So it's just like a few blocks from here.
South of, in fact, it's even south of Mountain. View.
Yeah.
South of
It's across from the tennis court. Yeah.
Okay.
It's unbelievable. I mean, I'm sure it's appropriate somewhere in America where you have like brownstones or this is what this is what the accepted world is. But in Reno, Nevada, where the accepted world is light, trees, view,
Right.
it doesn't really go very well. And I can't even believe the people that living there that inherited this,
Right.
already. It's just.
They're gonna do the same.
All it was
People lost all the value of their property, the original.
And that's a big, protecting existing developments is,
Right.
is something we tried to do with our screening section. And it didn't work the way it was intended. It was just wonky, the way that it was written. But the intention was if you have an existing S, you are protecting that use by certain screening methods. And so
Didn't work
that
out.
was the intention.
It just didn't
Another
work out.
problem with this special use permit having flown out the window, that nobody has any choice. I mean, we have people that are building, 2 stories next to a single story house, blocking light and it's just awful. I don't understand why these things are happening in the city.
Yeah.
Well, there's I would say a fairly strong divide on the council. That some people say that doesn't matter. What matters is getting more within the Medicare.
I know, but that's the trouble.
And there's other people on the council that say, no, that really does matter because it speaks to the quality of life. And what we expect in Reno, Nevada, and what sets Reno apart, right? We're not Philadelphia with, brownstones, 10 brownstones all attached dwelling. We're not that place.
Right, yeah.
No, and unfortunately, the attitude today is if it meets the density requirement, or if it fits let's put it in, they don't pay attention to what really is happening in the neighborhood. Now it's affecting them.
Well, like that one shouldn't have just been a building permit. That should have been a something. It's so close. When you see it, you will be stunned.
Right, and so
It was jaw dropping.
and sometimes it's hard, looking at something.
On a plan.
Or before you can see a plan. Okay, let's play some trial runs, this should work, and then you see what gets built. And so that's kind of part of this cleanup is we've seen what got built with the 2021 zoning code. And maybe there's some things that we could do better. And so just to continue, so some other of the zoning code cleanup items, which is a great segue, is residential compatibility. And so we've had multiple complaints about residential compatibility.
That
And how,
there is none.
and how we're not doing, well enough, and we're not protecting the existing residential that I mentioned. Some of the problems that we put in regulations in our code.
Yeah.
We have requirements for setbacks, and we have requirements for setbacks, and there's this section. It's almost impossible to interpret on when you have to do a step back versus a setback. So cleaning that up, why should it be rocket science to interpret what's built? And truly, the intention here is that you don't have to hire an architect to build an addition. You can look at our zoning code and clearly understand where you can build and how you can build it. And it's one of the things I brought up is maybe you create a list of design options and you have to meet 5 or 10 of them. Or, if you're adjacent to residential, you have to meet all 10 of them. Something like that. So those are the things we're looking at different jurisdictions because we're not the only ones who struggle with this. There's comparable areas like Boise, places up in Washington that have a river and they value the same things that we do. So how are they doing it? I know Boise just did a whole complete rewrite, so I couldn't contact them and how things are over there. And maybe there's some things that we can steal. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Next slide. Another big ticket item is industrial development. We've been getting a ton of complaints. And so I hope this shows that we do listen.
I'm impressed already from what you've said so far.
And it's valid because if nobody wants to be living next to somewhere where there's trucks coming all hours of the night, dust blowing in their faces, dock doors opening and closing and, and it's all hours of the night. And I think really the issue is, and I don't mean to use this as an excuse, but the COVID really intensified our online shopping and the industrial era was COVID. I mean, people were at home shopping online and we just saw a huge industrial boom that maybe we didn't anticipate. We have been, to be fair, we've been seeing that leading up to COVID, but it just skyrocketed. And so we need to make it better. Oh, go ahead.
Because part of what happened, I think is, say that's a residential neighborhood.
Which it is.
Yeah.
And then somebody comes in and says, we need this big facility, blah, blah. So we take the residential neighborhood out and we put this here.
That's right.
There's a term called context, okay? The question here is context. When you're thinking about putting that big building in there, what's the context? How does that change the context of the residential neighborhood, the feel of the residential neighborhood? These are to some degree subjective, criteria, but it's the kind of criteria that affect people's lives.
And you know what else? It's, you can't always explain it, just like you said, context, but what does that even mean? Maybe you guys have to, you know when you see it, this is not good. You
Right.
maybe can't put all the words, you maybe can't explain, like you've done a good job of starting to explain, but just imagine this. People are at home during the day, COVID changed that too. But also they're home at night, obviously trying to sleep. And with all of this action happening, a couple hundred feet from, people parking and changing, shifts changing. I mean, how are you supposed to sleep?
No, exactly. And you hit the nail on the head context. If it were a case by case situation where we could just kind of in good faith, take each project and say, no, this clearly doesn't make sense. The problem is it's tough to write context into code because you have to account for everyone. And so that's kind of the nuances that we're trying to get at.
With zoning and the code, my question is, if you've got houses on the top of the picture, and you've got houses on why is the middle of that zoned industrial?
I don't even know if this is in Reno.
I was gonna say, here.
No, there's palm trees.
Yeah, this
It's
is
not Reno.
for context.
But there is something similar in Reno
Right.
where I can't understand why there's these, we keep talking about it in here in the NAB about these industrial buildings keep popping up,
Right.
like right across the street from these residential buildings. And for me, or even down off of like Holcomb or Holcomb Hits Virginia Street, and they want to build that commercial center and there's house. I'm like, how is it that there's commercial right that butts up to residential or kind of in the middle of it?
Well, I think it brings up the need to talk about buffers. So one of the things in North Valley that was a constant was that all of the North Valley's representatives, whether it was Paul McKenzie, Bonnie Weber, or now Megan Ebert, have all said, we can't have this. Every one of them has said it. And then they've negotiated site by site, these buffers of 400 feet or something. Still, sound carries in the middle of the night. 400 feet may not be the magic answer, but there needs to be a something that, and to separate industrial from residential. And to Councilwoman Breckus's point, she has brought this up for 8 years, that we needed a separate industrial zoning code, designation. Because in industrial, there's many things that fit in industrial. And she said these kind of things should be their own classification.
Right.
I don't know what you're thinking about that.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a great point that we thought 400 feet, that's gotta be good enough, and it's not. And so, we actually had a great, sorry to segue, but,
Okay.
or sidetrack, we had a great training from a acoustical engineer on what do we do here? How do we stop sound from traveling? Because 400 feet isn't enough, 1,000 feet probably would be enough. And really, I'm sure it sounds obvious to many of you, but physical barriers is gonna be the only thing for buffering. And even if you were to put the densest evergreens ever out there.
Right.
It's not going to stop the sound. And so we've got to find a way, not that we want cinder block walls everywhere, but to make that look appealing with some landscaping and have those buffer areas in between. And to be fair, usually you don't have industrial zoning next to single family zoning, but it would be single family next to some mixed use, which can have warehousing, but there's some sort of caveat. So they've just been able to kind of
Inch the way in.
yeah, inch their way. That's true.
So what you need is actually set of criteria which say for 92.5% all of our setbacks are in front. But if we see this, and this, we can now raise the issue whether that's appropriate. And we can in fact force the change. I suspect you don't have the authority to really do that if they're following all the criteria. But if you're looking at it, I mean, the time to catch this is when you're in the approval process and say, this just doesn't look like it's gonna work.
Right.
We have to talk about this, and you gotta have the authority to raise that question.
And we have a type of that with height over 100 feet or height over 45 feet in certain districts requires a planning commission approval. Or units over a certain amount require machines. So we have some sort of that, but I just don't think we're there yet. You had a question about?
Yes. You write lighting concerns and noise concerns.
Yes.
I would be titling that lighting pollution, noise pollution. And then address that industrially and make a limitation, because just because somebody builds a fulfillment center like that, whatever it is, the current builder could give stated hours of operation, 10 hours a day. They get a new tenant and that's around the clock. The dock doors are up and down and the lights are moving and the trucks are coming in and out. So lighting and noise are pollutants. And those should be addressed much stricter in your zoning code. And it might be under that industrial zoning area,
Definitely.
much clearer defined. And hours of operation, if you're on top of a residential, you could specify this building will always have these hours of operation regardless of the tenant.
Yeah, and we do have something similar. And so we have hour restrictions, we have light restrictions that are just basic. And we have a nuisance section in our code that's just for everybody across the board. But like I said, clearly something's not right.
Working.
Yeah, and so I think we have good bones, I really do. We have the sections that can handle this stuff. We just need to kind of finagle it to make sure that we're doing a little bit more. Next slide, please.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
I think I've gotten lost for the goal for this evening presentation.
Yeah.
Like, are you seeking everyone's feedback on all of these zoning codes? Are we going through the process and the timeline in which you're going to be seeking and what we should be studying and bringing to you later? Like, I don't know, I feel like we're all over the place right now. And I was like, wait, what are we doing? What do you want from us
We've
tonight?
gotten a little off track. Let me finish up and then I'll let you know what the goal is. I'll wrap up with that if that's okay. And we're almost done. So shouldn't be too much longer. Just some more cleanup items, some examples, 2.5 stories. We have a very confusing definition. I just had to tell someone yesterday what a half a story is.
Yeah.
And it makes me so upset to have to say that definition over and over again, especially when the person isn't an architect. You just don't get it.
What is it?
What is it? It's basically intended to be like a loft. And so the way that it reads is that you can have half of the footprint of one of the stories with no more than like 6 feet of occupiable space. And so the idea is that, yeah. So you get it, but most people don't.
I just wanted to remember that was what you were talking about, I think, but then I forgot.
Yeah, and then, our setback standards. So I said my favorite thing about our rewrite was that we had this one page you could go to for your zone, but it still kind of references some other areas you have to go to. Reevaluate our side setbacks, which we had just talked about. I'm bummed Carmen left, but it's been brought up, and so we need to fix it. Next slide, please. So just quickly, we touched on the 2 buckets. First bucket was the things we just went through. Second bucket is city council priorities. There are 3 items that we are wrapping into the zoning code cleanup, and those are appeals, signs, and telecommunications. The reason we are able to, well, there's a couple reasons that we are able to wrap those into zoning code cleanup is 1, they already exist in our zoning code, so we're not introducing any new ordinance. 2, we were able to hire a consultant that specializes in law and planning. And they have experience in those 3 areas specifically. And so we have started the conversation with that consultant. Other than that, we've had some questions of like, well, I really want sustainability and wildland and urban interface, wildlife safety to be a priority. And it is, but it's a separate process that we will have to devote all of our time to, and probably hire a consultant that specializes in those things because they are so big and important, and especially because they will require a new ordinance to be introduced. Next slide, please. So we're getting on to our goal for this evening. This is kind of the very first step of our outreach process. And the goal of this really is to just let you know this is happening, what we're trying to do, and kind of let you know how the rest of this process will unfold. There's been some talk, we've created a technical advisory committee, and I think there's been some confusion about this committee, so I wanted to clear it up. This isn't a committee that's going to be telling us, well, we don't like this and we don't like that. This is a committee, and we wanted to make sure that we had a very intentional way of creating it, because I don't want to just handpick my best friends, and that doesn't look good, of course. And so we took everybody who submitted a planning application since our zoning code was adopted, because they are the ones that will be submitting.
Planning application.
Correct, so conditional use.
Okay.
A site plan review.
Okay, an application.
An application, but not building permits, because that would.
Gotcha.
Thousands of.
All right, you took everyone.
Everyone who submitted a planning application since 2021. And the idea with this committee is to say, how would you submit an application with these rules? Not to say, do you like this or do you not like this? Because that's really what the public's point of in this whole process is. And so that brings me to the stakeholder outreach. So stakeholder outreach is going to be late summer, early fall, and we're intending to have, we're touching every title or every chapter of this title. So we're probably going to have a lot of stakeholder meetings, and the intention here is to say, today we're talking about science and only science. So if you care about science, come, and if you don't, stay home. But what I don't want to do is get in an issue where maybe 100 people show up with all different interests, and we just spend, the time spinning our wheels and nothing ever gets done. So we really want to make sure that these stakeholder outreach meetings are really focused on a very specific item of our code that we're having issues with. So I'm sure when we talk about industrial development, North Valley is going to show up, and that's great because they're the ones that are dealing with this right now. And I hope when we talk about residential compatibility that Herman shows up and tells us her concerns. So that's kind of the idea of how this will play out. We have created a webpage. It's on our City of Reno website as a whole. It's one of the tabs. And this webpage is pretty blank right now, but it will have all of our documents as they become available. So we don't have anything drafted. yet, but as we get draft, we'll upload everything there. And then we will have all of our meeting dates and times on there and locations as well. And then we have the areas that we're focusing on. And I wanted to look at those specifically. Yeah.
Okay, so when you were explaining about the technical advisory committee, I think in one of your presentations that I attended by Zoom, I said, you know, throughout the entire Title 18 process, there were a myriad of people saying, how come the public doesn't get to be engaged in what you're doing here? And I think I brought that up to you about what, so perhaps, as you say, I may have completely misunderstood what this version of the technical advisory, but if it's like the Title 18 version, that was really lopsided input. And so, but what I think I hear you saying is that I misunderstood what this version, what your version of the technical advisory committee is going to be doing. Which
Well,
is,
you know what I heard her say was, if you submitted an application since 2021, you're on it.
right,
Average member of the public did not submit an application.
Understand.
You did not, I did not, Mimi did not,
and I
Mel did not, so we're not on the technical advisory.
understand that.
So I think that is what she's saying. It's a specialized group of people
Yeah,
that have submitted.
my question
with
was
a
different.
perspective of I submitted,
I
and
understand.
not even what I like or not like is what I heard her
Right,
say.
yeah, and I think Angela Boots was in that app.
Yes,
Word one,
yeah.
yes,
I think
so
it was
that
Word
was
one.
me, but,
So that's what I'm
Yeah.
asking you about. and
Right.
I understand Naomi,
No,
what she said, what you said, but that's what I'm asking you, like what you
What-
envisioned that happened.
yes, and that the reason I brought it up is because we've gotten that question a couple of times. And to your point, it might be because of the 2021 process that
Right.
we weren't happy with. And so the idea of this task that we're calling it, is not to create the code. That's through the stakeholder process.
Okay,
To clarify, the idea of the fact is when you submit your next planning application, because you have and you will, how are you going to interpret this?
I see.
Does
Like
that
a
make
vetting?
sense?
Yes, makes a lot more
Like
sense.
vetting.
Kind of, yeah, just some
Yeah.
test cases. If
For
we put in
users,
yeah.
these languages,
Users.
For existing users.
Okay,
Yeah.
maybe that's what you should call it. I mean,
Yeah.
it'd be a more descriptive, existing users.
yeah, existing, yeah, like
Yeah.
the computer program.
Kind of, because the technical advisory committee just, and then when Angela listed all the people, you know, the architects, all the
Mhm.
same people that were on the technical advisory committee for
Yeah.
Title 18, it's like, well, you're doing this again,
Right,
Maybe a name change is needed to create.
to create a separation.
yes, yeah, no, that's,
Users.
different code.
yeah. No, that's a great point. And naturally, it will be the same people because we get so many.
Right, but my
So-
concept was entirely different and they were actually creating code.
Right, no, and that's a great.
And it would be hard to keep them from doing it again, frankly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what they're used to doing in every process.
And to be fair, you know, if we have somebody who says, I hate this section of your code when I'm applying it, and I would love it if you did that. We will hold that in the same way that a member of the public says, your residential adjacency section is difficult because of X. And if they have recommendations of what we can do, we'll bring that to the stakeholders, which would be the public, and say the development community, or we don't even have to say who, but this has been proposed. What do you guys think of this? And
Okay.
so that's kind of the idea of how this will work.
Okay, thank you for that
Renaming is
clarification.
a good idea.
I know, it's a good. it's-
Really, because it sounds just like the one that there were
Right.
20 people at council saying we're burned here, you know?
And people hold on to that feeling like they weren't included, and so it's a good point, we should change.
Yeah, I think that would help because you are
You could
actually
call these
talking,
people stakeholders, you could call them existing users stakeholders, and
Right,
in other words, everybody has an equal say at the table.
Mhm.
They're just providing different type of input.
right,
yeah, I call it public outreach. Because everybody's a stakeholder, but when you say stakeholder, everybody thinks you've selected this. How are you defining the stakeholders?
and it's funny because we say stakeholders, and that's the general public. And that was intended to say, we're trying to be better is what we did 2021.
They
But
won't, they
it
won't
is-
believe it.
Exactly, so we need to change technical advisory committee as well as state.
I don't know. When you say stakeholder, because my argument in 2021 was like, I am a stakeholder. How come you won't listen to me?
Well, and so that's what we've changed, so you are a stakeholder this round.
I know. So, but if you change stakeholder, people who felt like I felt maybe won't feel argumentative going in.
Oh, right, like the tech.
Yeah,
Next slide, please.
if that's helpful, I don't know.
No, it is very helpful, because it's funny, we've had that comment a couple times at the technical advisory committee, and I was wondering where that came from, and so it's nice. to be able
Real
to
big
put
burn from last time.
finger on that. Timelines, these are flexible, because the last thing we want to do, like I said, this is cleanup. We don't want to have to force something through. We have a zoning code that we're using, and I don't want to just force something through because we think we have to by the end of the year.
Right.
And so the general timelines, draft edits and stakeholder input, end of summer, early fall. Public review and engagement will be fall, winter. We don't intend to bring anything to planning commission and get anything adopted until end of 2024. I think that gives us ample time. We really want to push the stakeholder or the public, the public engagement this year though, because I don't want that to be drawn out. People will lose interest. So we're going to cram in some meetings until the end of the year. Then we can kind of start drafting things in 2024 and make sure that we get it right. The last slide.
And you know, if you have something that we want to discuss, if you let him know about it, we could put it on the agenda.
Oh, yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
And we will use the NAPS. It's such an easy tool for us to get some people that are interested together. Is there another slide?
Nope, that's the last one.
So that's it. So to kind of wrap up, our goal for tonight was really to just tell you what we're doing and an introduction of why we're doing it. If you have comments or if you have really specific things that you are interested in, all of you are on the stakeholder list. So
Already.
this is, you will all automatically get bombarded with emails from me of a new meeting that we are going to be coordinating next week for. And so if you're interested, come, and if not, don't come. It's really that simple. But you are all automatically forced to be on the list because you are now members. If you have anybody that you would like to be added to the list, you can send me an email. They have my information and they are automatically.
Should you have just one of those newsletters where someone can self-check and sign themselves up?
It's a good idea. I can look into how we can get that.
It's a really easy way.
Okay,
I mean, then he can add them, you can add them,
Right.
they can add themselves.
I'll look into how we can get that organized. It's a great idea.
You have that on your website to email you if you want to be on your list
Yes.
or something, right?
Yes,
Yeah, but I mean, that's an extra process in your world.
it's archaic.
Well, that's what I'm saying, like, why do it?
No, it's a great point. I will, I'll see if we can get the times.
You go back to the, about 3 slides where you had the list, there you go. So, I want to just say this, signs was not a council priority. You heard me at the meeting. We didn't suddenly say, hey, this has to be fixed. You guys said this has to be fixed, so it wasn't generated by us. Telecommunications, the same way, you guys said, we're having problems with cell phone towers. I actually agree.
Right.
But let me tell you something, on this wildland urban interface, the longer we wait, a couple of these things like the sustainability and historic preservation of wildland, probably those 3 things, you're either losing time to affect change, like sustainability, or you're losing homes and businesses to preserve, like it's a loss. And on wildland, there was apparently, and I have to read it still, a editorial produced by either Endow or major member of Endow this last week. They were virtually crying in the email, the editorial, that in the Bird Eye area, the mule deer population, the construction that's happening is obliterating the mule deer habitat right now today. And they wrote an editorial. So right now today, my understanding was they got their PUD, like San Lucas. I don't know which development they're speaking of, but let's take San Lucas. It was denied. It was appealed by the developer. We lost. It was almost unanimous denial. We lost. We could have appealed to a higher court. We didn't. But most of the reviews that are from Endow go, we'll review it at final map. But they're clearing and grading now. They're probably not at final map. I'm guessing because presumably you would have preserved some corridors and said, don't work in these areas. So right now today, destruction's happening because of clearing and grading. And the Endow review, which was required by the legislature to begin last December, this January, has not happened. And so something is very broken here and we're extirpating, wiping out this habitat that we can't replicate.
Right,
So I'm just saying, some of these things have a little bit of urgency.
yeah, no, definitely, and it got brought up in,
Screen sharing.
our,
Tyler.
I know, I'm responding to one of the members who has to hop off.
another NABS.
Same thing? or-
Same thing, wildland everything.
Oh, really?
We're five, obviously.
Oh, we're fine.
And so I think especially when you speak of sustainability and the environment, it's a ticking
Exactly.
time bomb. And so I don't want that to get lost that we are working on that, but that's not this, because it's so big that we have to dedicate our time to that and make sure we get it right. But I totally agree with you. I think the longer we wait, the worse.
Can you do something like in condition approvals,
Definitely.
saying that no construction can begin until
Like,
NDOT
I
does
think
their
we should
thing?
Fix the clearing grading stuff, that it should match up. Let me give you another example. How many complaints have I had right up to today? Almost every day, I get a letter about Lake Ridge saying that they're not complying with their permit requirements for dust control, tree maintenance, and there's a third thing. So I'm sending them up to code. There's no requirement, they demoed a building. And they've left the site sitting. And people are very worked up about it, as worked up as industrial and residential in North Valley. They are I'm getting a letter a day. I haven't sent to you, of course, but I'm sending them to code enforcement, sending them to Doug, I'm sending them all the places that I think can help. I've told them, like, look, I called the developer myself, I told them, like, you need to put in dust control, you need to water the trees, etc. But you know, they're not listening to me. So some of these things, they're gonna lose those trees. We are having a tremendous amount of dust in the air. So I don't know if there's anything here about code enforcement. I don't know.
No, different title.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, but maybe there should be a thing to her point. When you get this development, you have to start construction in so many days, or you lose the entitlement, or, you know.
There is, so we do have time limits on there. To answer your question though about conditioning, you can't start construction until, is that what you were saying?
Yeah, so that
Yeah.
wildlife can actually have done what they needed to do for the mule deer.
Like, why go grade it and sit there for 5 years?
Oh, I see what you're saying. So if
Right?
you grade it,
Yeah,
you have to develop within a certain amount of time.
yeah, or even to ensure that the wildlife people have had a chance to look at the habitat destruction and put in mitigation before they start destroying the habitat.
Yeah, so we do have to be careful. There is some case law as far as how long you give somebody
Yeah.
to develop the site. It can be considered like a takings.
Right,
So we
This
have to
is
be
a different
careful.
way to do it. This would say you can't begin grading until 30 days or something before construction, not you must begin.
Right.
Okay, the reverse kind of, it's connecting to activities. I think you could do that.
And we've gotten better at that because before the recession, I don't know if you remember this, we used to issue foundation permits and then we had a bunch of foundations sitting in buildings.
right.
So we've come pretty far, but to your point, we do have a lot of grading that there's no project that ever comes of that. And that's terrible because you maybe flat grade a mountainside.
Yeah, and
nothing
then
gets
that's
built.
it.
So definitely something.
That's why I brought up Lakers. They demoed it. It's gone from the community for
Yeah.
5 years. Nothing replacing it, nothing.
I thought grading was something that we had prioritized, but I think that kind of ties in with major drainage way to the wildland urban interface. But it has been identified as something, it's tough because air quality.
Yeah,
has
I bet.
some control there that we can't kind of step on their toes, but there is tons we can do with that process.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
No, good presentation. Thank you. Sorry I interrupted you so many times, but I
It's
had
funny, we got
questions.
sidetracked, but I just can keep talking.
Well, I just was,
You have to help us understand what the process is, understand what the problems are. If we have that, then maybe we can give you some useful information.
And that's really the goal with these stakeholder meetings is to say, this is the things that staff has had a hard time administering. What do you think should be the appropriate response to this?
Yeah.
And so I'm hopeful that that's really what happens with these engagement and that people show up, because sometimes you have a meeting,
My thought, and I hope when you get to the tree sections, you have had a hard time administering it the whole time I've been. There's been all kind of inconsistent interpretations about tree inventory, about when you need a tree preservation plan. All these different interpretations.
Yes.
Public trees and private trees. When we did the tree ordinance, we tried to simply improve upon what was already there, like put some detail around it. So that there wasn't so much interpretation. And that was rejected. I mean, you know how you can sway, transfer over into substantive changes when what you're really trying to do clarity, right? You're not trying to change it. But here's an example. There's a requirement that you have a landscape, as-built. They're not sending them in, nobody's worried about it. It's already in the code.
Yes.
It's in the code.
And I'm not sure if, this board does, but we did hire a associate planner, a landscape specialist. And the hope is that they can help administer the things we are already requiring and maybe doing random site visits, because it's been brought to our attention that, well, they just put in whatever trees they can get at Moana, and they're not even.
They don't follow their plans.
They're not following the plans, and so
Yeah.
we need to really do these random spot checks, or every single time have a landscape architect who really knows what they were supposed to be
Well,
building.
let me give you one more example, and this is really heartbreaking for everyone. So Southeast Connector, RTC, put in hundreds of trees. And they did not follow the tree code, which has a list of prohibited species for public right of ways. They put in these, not elms, but okay, I'm spacing out what the tree was, but it's on the prohibited. There's only 7 trees. On the
Russian
prohibited.
Was it a willow?
Wasn't a willow, it was like an elm, it has its own part. It's not cottonwood, it's not elm, it's like a locust. Anyway, it has its own beetle, that's why it's on the prohibited list. I actually pull it up 1 second, I'll tell you before you go.
Sure.
Every tree died. From the beetle. The very thing that we said don't do. But whoever's reviewing it, who's ever ensuring compatibility, then check this thing.
Yeah, and to be fair, it happens, sometimes things
Happen.
slip through the cracks.
Sure.
But it's been happening a little more than maybe we're comfortable with. And
Yeah.
I'm the first to say,
Thank you.
I'll drive through a new development and half the trees are dead and nobody makes them plant new trees.
Right.
They're required to replace the trees, aren't they?
But it's just,
But somebody's gotta make them do it.
we have to complain it or.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, what was that?
No, I was gonna say, if nobody tells you that that happened,
Then we don't know.
then you don't know, and then the same mistake. can be repeated.
Exactly.
Part of it is getting you on the ground information about these problems, so they can be addressed.
And
Maybe the city could hire interns, summer interns for people who are interested in planning. I'm not kidding, you know, you pay,
we do have 2 interns,
like, teach them what they need to know and have them go drive around.
right, and I think, I don't know, code enforcement, it's all about hiring interns, but that's it, very.
Just to do the checking, you know, just to be the person that reports.
Yeah, and I will say, I've gone to the ward board now a couple of times, and I encourage them, and just as you all as well, to reach out to me because it's your neighborhood. You know better than I do about the issues and the problems that you may be facing. And so if we didn't get those calls and complaints about industrial report, we might think it's all going great. Everyone's happy. What we're doing is working. Nobody's upset. So just let me know, reach out to me or the planning team. And maybe we can fix it.
Thank you.
So green ash,
Oh, yeah.
they put in green ash, which is on the prohibited list. They're susceptible, very susceptible to western ash bark beetle.
I didn't know they had their own beetle.
It's called the western
Ash
ash bark. Beetle. Just like there's a pine and an elm.
Yeah.
Right, Dutch elm disease. A lot of things have unique diseases to them or beetles. So my point, you know, well intended, 200, 300, 400 trees. A lot of money spent, all dead.
Intended.
I mean, I don't think that's the outcome RTC really wanted, but someone wasn't at home, you know,
Exactly.
paying attention to those facts.
And even if it's a requirement we have and maybe it didn't get enforced, let us know and we can try to get to the bottom of it.
It's a good point.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Grace.
I live in New Valley, so yeah.
So when you get to the tennis court, on your right,
Yeah, it's,
drive slow. You might have to turn around and go back, but you will see it. You'll go.
if you get right to Mountain View, you've gone just 2 complexes too far.
Should I stand in the middle of it?
So do you know Mountain View's on the right?
Yes,
So before Mountain View,
because it's on, below urban, right? South of urban.
south of Mountain.
Okay,
Yeah, urban is a hard, I can never remember where it turns in, but I think
Yeah,
it's
but it's
south
south
of
of
urban.
Mountain.
okay, yeah, I'll take a look. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Good discussion, board members. We've had 2 heavy duty presentations, tonight, a lot of
It was super interesting.
a lot of policy things, a lot of, changes, and it's very cool and rewarding that we can be a part of it. So
Yeah,
I encourage all of you, to go in again and work on the redistricting, put in your, thoughts on the map, and then we'll watch for more updates on this zoning code cleanup. So this is something we've been all talking about for years in here. So
Yeah.
it's great that we can have an input. Maybe we can help, foster some changes.
Maybe we should write something about drive-throughs.
yeah.
For sure. With we seem to be the experts on
Apparently.
when not to put them in. So thank you, everybody, again, for your participation and your input. It's great commentary. We're on item C, boards, commission, committee member reports and announcements. Anybody have anything to announce, report?
Yeah, I got an announcement. Just FYI, the city of Reno, is working with Mamie Tolles Elementary School. And this weekend, on Saturday, 8 o'clock, they're gonna be doing, planting 20 some big trees, bigger than normal trees. And, it's, there's been a ton of participation from people. Trees are being delivered tomorrow, I think, or the next day. So just, I think they're had a call for volunteers. I didn't ever hear of a call for volunteers, but I don't know whether, so just FYI, that's something you're interested in. It's coming up. Also, we had a huge turnout for our cleanup that we held at the Monty Ranch High School. Oh my gosh, something like 400 attendees again. I mean, we ran out of space. I begged for more bins. They brought in 7. We filled all 7. They said we were gonna have 3. I said, that's not gonna work.
Wow.
Yeah, that's
And
crazy.
even any average one, now they expect it of us, right? They ran out of space in hazardous waste, ran out of space in electrical, had a nice debrief with the people that are doing it now. And so, drive lanes, everything, that they didn't follow the map, fill in the blank, but people as usually were incredibly happy until they ran out of room, then they were incredibly unhappy. Right? They loaded all the stuff into their vehicle and now they can't drop it. So that's a big lesson learned that everyone we're struggling with on how to deal with being a victim of our own success, so to speak. People love these things, so they do.
Oh, we'll plan for more.
We are, so we're gonna have more in fall.
Good.
So, and we're looking for the right space. We had thought of Manzanita. They were leaning against doing it at schools. So I mean, Damani was fantastic, but Huff Acre is small. And if you're gonna combine 7 bins and electrical and hazardous, that's not enough for us.
Why not
So
double the bins, go to 14 and go to like the convention center parking lot?
I was thinking for the percent.
well, that's a great idea. One of the things about it is that people are driving by in their own neighborhood and seeing them.
Yeah,
And
sure.
that drives more business, but we've been doing such good outreach. Like, for example, the one we did at Summit Mall, no one came, very few people came.
Right.
They didn't know about it, they didn't see it.
Yeah.
We weren't necessarily postcarding at that time. So anyway, it was poorly attended, but the ones that we've done in schools have been very well, Damani, DePoli, Brown Middle School, Huff Acre, all of those have been very well attended.
And more central locations. Summit Malls out on
Yeah.
the outskirts,
Right,
but the convention center might be, you
thought of
could
Crystal.
really snake a lot of cars.
Yeah,
I just don't know about the parking lot enough.
Yeah,
It's not very good.
RSCBA is probably hard to deal with too.
It's our CBA owns it.
The convention center?
No, I was thinking of Crystal Lake Park, but.
Oh, Crystal Lake Park, I missed that, I'm
Convention center,
sorry.
We could probably get it set up, but I have to say, they don't have a perfect parking lot.
Yeah.
That's hard to get
It is,
in.
I know. Looks, we could set it up on the Atlantis parking lot.
Also, what about Old Town
Across the
Hall?
street.
Well, they haven't built their storage area yet. They have a lot of space, front side and back side there, and they would probably be really happy
It's not a bad
to
idea.
do something nice for the community, because that's how the owner is.
Yeah.
Huh?
Mhm. I wrote it down.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, town hall, what?
Rob, Rob.
Yeah,
Yeah, because they like being helpful, you know, they like participating.
sort of.
We've known Rob for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I like that.
Anyway, there's,
I really
Yeah.
like that idea.
The store quest is almost open. The
Oh,
storage
She
facility.
said it wasn't built, and you're saying it is built.
I was just there over the weekend and they got all the walls up inside for the storage units.
yeah, I just meant it wasn't active. I mean, it's not,
Oh.
it's not,
People aren't using.
Yeah.
yeah, it's not in business yet.
Well, it will next fall. It'll be open.
Yeah.
Okay.
We got the library on the backside. There's a whole lot of space back there too.
Any but other announcements or things? Future agenda items? Tyler, board members?
I think it actually would be cool to have the police chief.
You just read my mind.
Oh, really?
I
You
would-
should meet the new police
I
chief.
would like
She's
to meet.
pretty amazing. And we can have a really robust conversation about stuff. Because it's much different than a lower level police officer coming and just reporting statistics,
This is great.
right?
This is great. It was fun. We felt like we were having input here. This is a great meeting.
It was a great meeting. Like one of our best.
I guess that you guys are all engaged. It's really impressive. I do have a question about the July meeting.
Mhm.
Historically, sometimes we've taken July
canceled, yeah.
off.
Mhm.
And so I didn't know if that was something we would want to do again this coming up July, or if we feel that we're gonna have, like, we're stacked up with some important development projects, or there's nothing in the queue.
I'll reach out to our development team and see if there's any developments scheduled to come to the NAB already. If there's no developments scheduled to come to the NAB, it would be up to Councilmember Dewar.
We could just cancel.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Okay, perfect. But I'll, from the staff side, I'll definitely look into that. And of course, I'll keep you all informed of whatever happens.
And I'm gonna say that we have a few openings still in the NAB, so just passing the word to people.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
about The city council did, Fire Creek Casino ever appear before the
No.
council, and they don't have to, is that correct?
Well, I mean,
They got approved by the planning commission.
oh, did they?
They did, but I didn't.
No,
know if
they don't
had
have. I don't believe they have to come. Gaming just on its own because it's gaming.
Going back to the open position, I think I have someone, do I, like, can I recommend her, or like, I'll wait till she submits, but do I ping one of you and say, I'm recruiting?
Yeah.
Recruit.
Yeah, you can just, after she submits her applications, just send an email to me saying, this is the person that I asked to fill out, like, here's their name. And I'll make sure that when we send the application over to Councilmember Dewar, it's noted that it came from you.
I submitted an application, but I have no idea what happened to it.
For,
My term is almost up.
for reappointment to the Ward 2. So the NAB applications are actually going to be on the July 19th city council meeting. So,
I assume that mine made it where it was supposed to go.
I'll double check and make sure. I believe I checked all of them, and anyone who was about to lapse, I checked to make sure they had reapplied and would be eligible to be reappointed. But I'll double check on yours,
Thank
Donna, and just make sure.
Any public comment?
Go ahead, Pablo. You'll have.
Alright, so in my, the final draft of number one look like, so that include Ward 6, that have own district, the South Reno district, you could see here. And then that newly Ward 2 look like. All the South in West Reno, Old South West Reno could be united as one community as a whole. And then that Ward 3, that include us, that means not to have to move out to Ward 3 all over here, the bad news for Miguel, I'm sorry. Yeah, I know you work on to the park,
Oh,
but
Miguel is not in Ward 3?
Miguel is in Donna Spring area.
Yeah.
So that include Donna Spring area, so we move Northeast Reno out of Ward 3, moving to Ward 5, that the newly Ward 1 where Devin Reese live, or I'm not sure what ward he's in because that's Summerland over here. And that Ward 6 does a little bit, it's a little bit gerrymandering, but I think that might work. And I've worked for it and that's it.
And did you do your populations?
Oh, yeah, look at that, less than 5%.
Amazing.
Oh, good job. Good job.
That's not easy.
Are you gonna submit it?
And then, I don't know, I know you live over here, but if you want to maintain as some want to maintain Southland, I could do it, then we could spend.
No, I'm not trying to do anything. I'm not. I mean, I'm just saying, it looks very interesting.
Yeah, except over here, the words, Captain Taylor district look a little bit gerrymanly, but I could fix that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pablo. Would anyone else in the room like to give public comment today? Go ahead, Audrey, you'll have 3 minutes.
On your park, project for the river.
Yeah.
I would look at Bend, Oregon. They have a hugely successful river development. Which included walkway, bike path, hiking path, river trail. And they did it in phases where they did a huge, mill district. It used to be a lumber mill along the river. They converted that mill district to an outdoor shopping,
It's really
beautiful,
cool.
beautiful
Really
spot,
cool.
totally cool. But then now they're connecting that with sort of inside town to, but they go farther south into the wilderness along the river, so they make it wild. And it's really fantastic model. So I would look at that model. They turned part of the river into a surfing river. They put boulders in, they.
Well, we have
engineered the
that
river.
actually. We have a kayak park in the river.
Right, so, but it's a good model for like a total,
Yeah.
like what you were talking about.
Right.
How much is the investment? What is it, like, how does it feel? How do they manage security?
Yeah.
And, it's just a,
Very cool.
it's a very, very inviting place. And it's
Fantastic.
thriving.
Right, and inviting.
Yes.
How neat is that?
Thank you.
Thank you for the suggestion.
Is there anyone on Zoom who'd like to give public comment today? If you'd like to give public comment on Zoom, please use the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom window. Madam Chair, we have no public commenters on Zoom and we have no further public comment.
I'd like to move to adjourn.
Second.
Move to adjourn.
Oh, somebody has to-
I'd like to-
I thought you
Somebody
did.
like to move. to
Right, I
adjourn.
was tired.
I'll second her motion.
Okay,
Okay.
I'll second. So all those in favor say aye.
Hi.
Good job to you guys.